This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. How to get into this book. Knock at the knocker on the door. Pull the bell at the side. Then, if you are very quiet, you'll hear a teeny tiny voice say through the grating, "Take down the key." This you will find at the back. You cannot mistake it, for it has JJ in the wards. Put the key in the keyhole, which it fits exactly. Unlock the door and walk in. To my dear little May. Preface. Who says that English folk have no fairy tales of their own? The present volume contains only a selection out of some 140, of which I have found traces in this country. It is probable that many more exist. A quarter of the tales in this volume have been collected during the last 10 years or so, and some of them have not been hitherto published. Up to 1870, it was equally said of France and of Italy that they possessed no folk tales. Yet within 15 years from that date, over 1,000 tales had been collected in each country. I am hoping that the present volume may lead to equal activity in this country, and would earnestly beg any reader of this book who knows of similar tales to communicate them, written down as they are told, to me, care of Mr. Nutt. The only reason, I imagine, why such tales have not hitherto been brought to light is the lamentable gap between the governing and recording classes and the dumb working classes of this country, dumb to others but eloquent among themselves. It would be no unpatriotic task to help to bridge over this gulf by giving a common fund of nursery literature to all classes of the English people, and, in any case, it can do no harm to add to the innocent gaiety of the nation. A word or two as to our title seems necessary. We have called our stories fairy tales, though few of them speak of fairies. The same remark applies to the collection of the Brothers Grimm, and to all the other European collections, which contain exactly the same classes of tales as ours. Yet our stories are what the little ones mean when they clamour for fairy tales, and this is the only name which they give to them. One cannot imagine a child saying, "Tell us a folk tale, nurse," or "Another nursery tale, please, grandma." As our book is intended for the little ones, we have indicated its contents by the name they use. The words fairy tales must accordingly be taken to include tales in which occurs something fairy, something extraordinary, fairies, giants, dwarfs, speaking animals. It must be taken also to cover tales in which what is extraordinary is the stupidity of some of the actors. Many of the tales in this volume, as in similar collections for other European countries, are what the folklorists call drolls. They serve to justify the title of Merry England, which used to be given to this country of ours, and indicate unsuspected capacity for fun and humour among the unlettered classes. The story of Tom Tit Tot, which opens our collection, is unequalled among all other folk tales I am acquainted with, for its combined sense of humour and dramatic power. The first adjective of our title also needs a similar extension of its meaning. I have acted on Molière's principle, and have taken what was good wherever I could find it. Thus, a couple of these stories have been found among descendants of English immigrants in America. A couple of others I tell as I heard them myself in my youth in Australia. One of the best was taken down from the mouth of an English gypsy. I have also included some stories that have only been found in Lowland Scotch. I have felt justified in doing this, as of the 21 folk tales contained in Chambers' Popular Rhymes of Scotland, no less than 16 are also to be found in an English form. With the folk tale, as with the ballad, Lowland Scotch may be regarded as simply a dialect of English, and it is a mere chance whether a tale is extant in one or other, or both. I have also rescued and retold a few fairy tales that only exist nowadays in the form of ballads. There are certain indications that the common form of the English fairy tale was the conte fable, a mixture of narrative and verse, of which the most illustrious example in literature is Aucassin and Nicolette. In one case I have endeavoured to retain this form, as the tale in which it occurs, Childe Roland, is mentioned by Shakespeare in King Lear, and is probably, as I have shown, the source of Milton's Comus. Late, as they have been collected, some dozen of the tales can be traced back to the 16th century, 2 of them being quoted by Shakespeare himself. In the majority of instances, I have had largely to rewrite these fairy tales, especially those in dialect, including the Lowland Scotch. Children, and sometimes those of larger growth, will not read dialect. I have also had to reduce the flatulent phraseology of the 18th century chapbooks, and to rewrite in simpler style the stories only extant in literary English. I have, however, left a few vulgarisms in the mouths of vulgar people. Children appreciate the dramatic propriety of this as much as their elders. Generally speaking, it has been my ambition to write as a good old nurse will speak when she tells fairy tales. I am doubtful as to my success in catching the colloquial romantic tone appropriate for such narratives, but the thing had to be done, or else my main object, to give a book of English fairy tales, which English children will listen to, would have been unachieved. This book is meant to be read aloud, and not merely taken in by the eye. In a few instances I have introduced or changed an incident. I have never done so, however, without mentioning the fact in the notes. These have been relegated to the obscurity of small print and a back place, while the little ones have been, perhaps unnecessarily, warned off them. They indicate my sources, and give a few references to parallels and variants which may be of interest to fellow students of folklore. It is, perhaps, not necessary to inform readers who are not fellow students that the study of folk tales has pretensions to be a science. It has its special terminology and its own methods of investigation, by which it is hoped, one of these days, to gain fuller knowledge of the workings of the popular mind, as well as traces of archaic modes of thought and custom. I hope on some future occasion to treat the subject of the English folk tale on a larger scale, and with all the necessary paraphernalia of prolegomena and excursus. I shall then, of course, reproduce my originals with literary accuracy, and have therefore felt the more at liberty on the present occasion to make the necessary deviations from this, in order to make the tales readable for children. Finally, I have to thank those by whose kindness in waiving their rights to some of these stories I have been enabled to compile this book. My friends Mr. E. Clodd, Mr. F. Hines Groom, and Mr. Andrew Lang have thus yielded up to me some of the most attractive stories in the following pages. The councils of the English and of the American folklore societies, and Messrs. Longmans, have also been equally generous. Nor can I close these remarks without a word of thanks and praise to the artistic skill with which my friend, Mr. J. D. Batten, has made the romance and humour of these stories live again, in the brilliant designs with which he has adorned these pages. It should be added that the dainty headpieces to Henny Penny and Mr. Fox are due to my old friend, Mr. Henry Ryland. Joseph Jacobs. End of the preface. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 1. Tom Tit Tot. Once upon a time there was a woman, and she baked 5 pies. And when they came out of the oven, they were that overbaked the crusts were too hard to eat. So she says to her daughter, "Daughter," says she, "put you them there pies on the shelf, and leave 'em there a little, and they'll come again." She meant, you know, the crust would get soft. But the girl, she says to herself, "Well, if they'll come again, I'll eat 'em now." And she set to work and ate 'em all, first and last. Well, come supper time, the woman said, "Go you and get one of them there pies. I dare say they've come again now." The girl went and she looked, and there was nothing but the dishes. So back she came, and says she, "No, they ain't come again." "Not one of 'em?" says the mother. "Not one of 'em," says she. "Well, come again or not come again," said the woman, "I'll have one for supper." "But you can't if they ain't come," said the girl. "But I can," says she. "Go you, and bring the best of 'em." "Best or worst," says the girl, "I've ate 'em all, and you can't have one till that's come again." Well, the woman she was done, and she took her spinning to the door to spin, and as she span, she sang. My daughter ate five pies today. My daughter ate five pies today. The king was coming down the street, and he heard her sing, but what she sang he couldn't hear, so he stopped and said, "What was that you were singing, my good woman?" The woman was ashamed to let him hear what her daughter had been doing, so she sang instead of that, "My daughter has spun five skeins today. My daughter has spun five skeins today." "Stars o' mine," said the king, "I never heard tell of any one that could do that." Then he said, "Look you here, I want a wife, and I'll marry your daughter. But look you here," says he, 11 months out of the year she shall have all she likes to eat, and all the gowns she likes to get, and all the company she likes to keep. But the last month of the year she'll have to spin 5 skeins every day, and if she don't, I shall kill her." "All right," says the woman, for she thought what a grand marriage that was, and as for the 5 skeins, when the time came, there'd be plenty of ways of getting out of it, and likely as he'd have forgotten all about it. Well, so they were married, and for 11 months the girl had all she liked to eat, and all the gowns she liked to get, and all the company she liked to keep. But when the time was getting over, she began to think about the skeins, and to wonder if he had 'em in mind. But not one word did he say about 'em, and she thought he'd wholly forgotten 'em. However, the last day of the last month, he takes her to a room she'd never set eyes on before. There was nothing in it but a spinning wheel and a stool. And says he, "Now, my dear, here you'll be shut in to-morrow with some victuals and some flax, and if you haven't spun 5 skeins by the night, your head'll go off." And away he went about his business. Well, she was that frightened. She'd always been such a gatless girl that she didn't so much as know how to spin, and what was she to do to-morrow with no one to come nigh her to help her? She sat down on a stool in the kitchen, and lor, how she did cry. However, all of a sudden she heard a sort of a knocking low down on the door. She upped and oped it, and what should she see but a small little black thing with a long tail. That looked up at her right curious, and that said, "What are you a-crying for?" "What's that to you?" says she. "Never you mind," that said, "but tell me what you're a-crying for." "That won't do me no good if I do," says she. "You don't know that," that said, and twirled that's tail round. "Well," says she, "that won't do no harm if that don't do no good," and she upped and told about the pies and the skeins and everything. "This is what I'll do," says the little black thing. "I'll come to your window every morning, and take the flax, and bring it spun at night." "What's your pay?" says she. That looked out of the corner of that's eyes, and that said, "I'll give you 3 guesses every night to guess my name, and if you haven't guessed it before the month's up, you shall be mine." Well, she thought she'd be sure to guess that's name before the month was up. "All right," says she, "I agree." "All right," that says, and law, how that twirled that's tail. Well, the next day her husband took her into the room, and there was the flax and the day's food. "Now there's the flax," says he, "and if that ain't spun up this night, off goes your head." And then he went out and locked the door. He'd hardly gone when there was a knocking against the window. She upped and she oped it, and there, sure enough, was the little old thing sitting on the ledge. "Where's the flax?" says he. "Here it be," says she, and she gave it to him. Well, come the evening, a knocking came again to the window. She upped and she oped it, and there was the little old thing with 5 skeins of flax on his arm. "Here it be," says he, and he gave it to her. "Now what's my name?" says he. "What, is that Bill?" says she. "No, that ain't," says he, and he twirled his tail. "Is that Ned?" says she. "No, that ain't," says he, and he twirled his tail. "Well, is that Mark?" says she. "No, that ain't," says he, and he twirled his tail harder, and away he flew. Well, when her husband came in, there were the 5 skeins ready for him. "I see I shan't have to kill you tonight, my dear," says he. "You'll have your food and your flax in the morning," says he, and away he goes. Well, every day the flax and the food were brought, and every day that there little black impet used to come mornings and evenings. And all the day the girl sat trying to think of names to say to it when it came at night. But she never hit on the right one. And as it got towards the end of the month, the impet began to look so maliceful, and that twirled that's tail faster and faster each time she gave a guess. At last it came to the last day but one. The impet came at night, along with the 5 skeins, and that said, "What, ain't you got my name yet?" "Is that Nicodemus?" says she. "No, 'tain't," that says. "Is that Samuel?" says she. "No, 'tain't," that says. "Oh, well, is that Methusalem?" says she. "No, 'tain't that neither," that says. Then that looks at her with that's eyes like a coal of fire, and that says, "Woman, there's only tomorrow night, and then you'll be mine." And away it flew. Well, she felt that horrid. However, she heard the king coming along the passage. In he came, and when he sees the 5 skeins, he says he, "Well, my dear," says he, "I don't see but what you'll have your skeins ready tomorrow night as well, and as I reckon I shan't have to kill you, I'll have supper in here tonight." So they brought supper, and another stool for him, and down the 2 sat. Well, he hadn't eaten but a mouthful or so when he stops and begins to laugh. "What is it?" says she. "Why," says he, "I was out a-hunting to-day, and I got away to a place in the wood I'd never seen before, and there was an old chalk pit, and I heard a kind of a sort of a humming. So I got off my hobby, and I went right quiet to the pit, and I looked down. Well, what should there be but the funniest little black thing you ever set eyes on. And what was that doing but that had a little spinning wheel, and that was spinning wonderful fast, and twirling that's tail. And as that span that sang, 'Nimmy, nimmy not, my name's Tom Tit Tot.'" Well, when the girl heard this, she felt as if she could have jumped out of her skin for joy, but she didn't say a word. Next day that there little thing looked so maliceful when he came for the flax. And when night came, she heard that knocking against the window panes. She oped the window, and that come right in on the ledge. That was grinning from ear to ear, and that's tail was twirling round so fast. "What's my name?" that says, as that gave her the skeins. "Is that Solomon?" she says, pretending to be afeard. "No, 'tain't," that says, and that came further into the room. "Well, is that Zebedee?" says she again. "No, 'tain't," says the impet, and then that laughed and twirled that's tail till you couldn't hardly see it. "Take time, woman," that says, "next guess and you're mine." And that stretched out that's black hands at her. Well, she backed a step or two, and she looked at it, and then she laughed out, and says she, pointing her finger at it, "Nimmy, nimmy not, your name's Tom Tit Tot." Well, when that heard her, that gave an awful shriek, and away that flew into the dark, and she never saw it any more. End Chapter 1. Tom Tit Tot. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 2. The Three Sillies. Once upon a time there was a farmer and his wife, who had one daughter, and she was courted by a gentleman. Every evening he used to come and see her, and stop to supper at the farmhouse, and the daughter used to be sent down into the cellar to draw the beer for supper. So one evening she had gone down to draw the beer, and she happened to look up at the ceiling while she was drawing, and she saw a mallet stuck in one of the beams. It must have been there a long, long time, but somehow or other she had never noticed it before, and she began a-thinking. And she thought it was very dangerous to have that mallet there, for she said to herself, "Suppose him and me was to be married, and we was to have a son, and he was to grow up to be a man, and come down into the cellar to draw the beer, like as I'm doing now, and the mallet was to fall on his head and kill him. What a dreadful thing it would be!" And she put down the candle and the jug, and sat herself down and began a-crying. Well, they began to wonder upstairs how it was that she was so long drawing the beer, and her mother went down to see after her, and she found her sitting on the settle crying, and the beer running over the floor. "Why, whatever is the matter?" said her mother. "Oh, mother," says she, "look at that horrid mallet. Suppose we was to be married, and was to have a son, and he was to grow up, and was to come down to the cellar to draw the beer, and the mallet was to fall on his head and kill him. What a dreadful thing it would be!" "Dear, dear, what a dreadful thing it would be!" said the mother, and she sat her down aside of the daughter, and started a-crying too. Then after a bit the father began to wonder that they didn't come back, and he went down into the cellar to look after them himself, and there they two sat a-crying, and the beer running all over the floor. "Whatever is the matter?" says he. "Why," says the mother, "look at that horrid mallet. Just suppose if our daughter and her sweetheart was to be married, and was to have a son, and he was to grow up, and was to come down into the cellar to draw the beer, and the mallet was to fall on his head and kill him. What a dreadful thing it would be!" "Dear, dear, dear, so it would," said the father, and he sat himself down aside of the other two, and started a-crying. Now the gentleman got tired of stopping up in the kitchen by himself, and at last he went down into the cellar too, to see what they were after. And there they three sat a-crying side by side, and the beer running all over the floor. And he ran straight and turned the tap. Then he said, "Whatever are you three doing, sitting there crying, and letting the beer run all over the floor?" "Oh," says the father, "look at that horrid mallet. Suppose you and our daughter was to be married, and was to have a son, and he was to grow up, and was to come down into the cellar to draw the beer, and the mallet was to fall on his head and kill him." And then they all started a-crying worse than before. But the gentleman burst out a-laughing, and reached up and pulled out the mallet. And then he said, "I've travelled many miles, and I never met 3 such big sillies as you 3 before. And now I shall start out on my travels again, and when I can find 3 bigger sillies than you 3, then I'll come back and marry your daughter." So he wished them good-bye, and started off on his travels, and left them all crying because the girl had lost her sweetheart. Well, he set out and he travelled a long way, and at last he came to a woman's cottage that had some grass growing on the roof. And the woman was trying to get her cow to go up a ladder to the grass, and the poor thing durst not go. So the gentleman asked the woman what she was doing. "Why, look ye," she said, "look at all that beautiful grass. I'm going to get the cow onto the roof to eat it. She'll be quite safe, for I shall tie a string round her neck, and pass it down the chimney, and tie it to my wrist as I go about the house, so she can't fall off without my knowing it." "Oh, you poor silly," said the gentleman. "You should cut the grass, and throw it down to the cow." But the woman thought it was easier to get the cow up the ladder than to get the grass down. So she pushed her and coaxed her, and got her up, and tied a string round her neck, and passed it down the chimney, and fastened it to her own wrist. And the gentleman went on his way. But he hadn't gone far when the cow tumbled off the roof, and hung by the string tied round her neck, and it strangled her. And the weight of the cow tied to her wrist pulled the woman up the chimney, and she stuck fast half-way, and was smothered in soot. Well, that was one big silly. And the gentleman went on, and he went to an inn to stop the night, and they were so full at the inn that they had to put him in a double-bedded room, and another traveller was to sleep in the other bed. The other man was a very pleasant fellow, and they got very friendly together. But in the morning, when they were both getting up, the gentleman was surprised to see the other hang his trousers on the knobs of the chest of drawers, and run across the room, and try to jump into them. And he tried over and over again, and couldn't manage it. And the gentleman wondered whatever he was doing it for. At last he stopped and wiped his face with his handkerchief. "Oh dear," he says, "I do think trousers are the most awkwardest kind of clothes that ever were. I can't think who could have invented such things. It takes me the best part of an hour to get into mine every morning, and I get so hot. How do you manage yours?" So the gentleman burst out a-laughing, and showed him how to put them on. And he was very much obliged to him, and said he never should have thought of doing it that way. So that was another big silly. Then the gentleman went on his travels again, and he came to a village, and outside the village there was a pond, and round the pond was a crowd of people, and they had got rakes and brooms and pitchforks, reaching into the pond. And the gentleman asked what was the matter. "Why," they said, "matter enough. Moon's tumbled into the pond, and we can't rake her out anyhow." So the gentleman burst out a-laughing, and told them to look up into the sky, and that it was only the shadow in the water. But they wouldn't listen to him, and abused him shamefully, and he got away as quick as he could. So there was a whole lot of sillies, bigger than them 3 sillies at home. So the gentleman turned back home again, and married the farmer's daughter. And if they didn't live happy for ever after, that's nothing to do with you or me. End of chapter 2. The 3 Sillies. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 3. The Rose Tree. There was once upon a time a good man who had 2 children, a girl by a first wife, and a boy by the second. The girl was as white as milk, and her lips were like cherries. Her hair was like golden silk, and it hung to the ground. Her brother loved her dearly, but her wicked stepmother hated her. "Child," said the stepmother one day, "go to the grocer's shop and buy me a pound of candles." She gave her the money, and the little girl went, bought the candles, and started on her return. There was a stile to cross. She put down the candles whilst she got over the stile. Up came a dog, and ran off with the candles. She went back to the grocer's, and she got a second bunch. She came to the stile, set down the candles, and proceeded to climb over. Up came the dog, and ran off with the candles. She went again to the grocer's, and she got a third bunch, and just the same happened. Then she came to her stepmother crying, for she had spent all the money, and had lost 3 bunches of candles. The stepmother was angry, but she pretended not to mind the loss. She said to the child, "Come, lay your head on my lap, that I may comb your hair." So the little one laid her head in the woman's lap, who proceeded to comb the yellow silken hair. And when she combed the hair, fell over her knees, and rolled right down to the ground. Then the stepmother hated her more for the beauty of her hair. So she said to her, "I cannot part your hair on my knee. Fetch a billet of wood." So she fetched it. Then said the stepmother, "I cannot part your hair with a comb. Fetch me an axe." So she fetched it. "Now," said the wicked woman, "lay your head down on the billet whilst I part your hair." Well, she laid down her little golden head without fear, and whist, down came the axe, and it was off. So the mother wiped the axe and laughed. Then she took the heart and liver of the little girl, and she stewed them, and brought them into the house for supper. The husband tasted them and shook his head. He said they tasted very strangely. She gave some to the little boy, but he would not eat. She tried to force him, but he refused, and ran out into the garden, and took up his little sister, and put her in a box, and buried the box under a rose tree. And every day he went to the tree and wept, till his tears ran down on the box. One day the rose tree flowered. It was spring, and there among the flowers was a white bird, and it sang and sang and sang like an angel out of heaven. Away it flew, and it went to a cobbler's shop, and perched itself on a tree hard by, and thus it sang: "My wicked mother slew me, my dear father ate me. My little brother whom I love sits below, and I sing above, stick, stock, stone dead." "Sing again that beautiful song," said the shoemaker, "if you will first give me those little red shoes you are making." The cobbler gave the shoes, and the bird sang the song, then flew to a tree in front of a watchmaker's, and sang: "My wicked mother slew me, my dear father ate me. My little brother whom I love sits below, and I sing above, stick, stock, stone dead." "Oh, the beautiful song! Sing it again, sweet bird," asked the watchmaker. "If you will give me first that gold watch and chain in your hand." The jeweller gave the watch and chain. The bird took it in one foot, the shoes in the other, and, after having repeated the song, flew away to where 3 millers were picking a millstone. The bird perched on a tree and sang: "My wicked mother slew me, my dear father ate me. My little brother whom I love sits below, and I sing above, stick." Then one of the men put down his tool and looked up from his work. "Stock." Then the second miller's man laid aside his tool and looked up. "Stone." Then the third miller's man laid down his tool and looked up. "Dead." Then the fourth miller's man laid aside his tool and looked up. "Stone." Then the fifth miller's man laid aside his tool and looked up. "Dead." Then the sixth miller's man laid aside his tool and looked up. "Stone." Then the seventh miller's man laid aside his tool and looked up. "Dead." Then all three cried out with one voice, "Oh, what a beautiful song! Sing it, sweet bird, again." "If you will put the millstone round my neck," said the bird. The men did what the bird wanted, and away to the tree it flew with the millstone round its neck, the red shoes in one foot, and the gold watch and chain in the other. It sang the song, and then flew home. It rattled the millstone against the eaves of the house, and the stepmother said, "It thunders." Then the little boy ran out to see the thunder, and down dropped the red shoes at his feet. It rattled the millstone against the eaves of the house once more, and the stepmother said again, "It thunders." Then the father ran out, and down fell the chain about his neck. In ran father and son, laughing and saying, "See what fine things the thunder has brought us." Then the bird rattled the millstone against the eaves of the house a third time, and the stepmother said, "It thunders again. Perhaps the thunder has brought something for me." And she ran out, but the moment she stepped outside the door, down fell the millstone on her head, and so she died. End of Chapter 3, The Rose Tree. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 4, The Old Woman and Her Pig. An old woman was sweeping her house, and she found a little crooked sixpence. "What," said she, "shall I do with this little sixpence? I will go to market and buy a little pig." As she was coming home, she came to a stile, but the piggy wouldn't go over the stile. She went a little further, and she met a dog. So she said to the dog, "Dog, bite pig. Piggy won't go over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the dog wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met a stick. So she said, "Stick, stick, beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the stick wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met a fire. So she said, "Fire, fire, burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the fire wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met some water. So she said, "Water, water, quench fire. Fire won't burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the water wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met an ox. So she said, "Ox, ox, drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the ox wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met a butcher. So she said, "Butcher, butcher, kill ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the butcher wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met a rope. So she said, "Rope, rope, hang butcher. Butcher won't kill ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the rope wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met a rat. So she said, "Rat, rat, gnaw rope. Rope won't hang butcher. Butcher won't kill ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile,
and I shan't get home tonight." But the rat wouldn't. She went a little further, and she met a cat. So she said, "Cat, cat, kill rat. Rat won't gnaw rope. Rope won't hang butcher. Butcher won't kill ox. Ox won't drink water. Water won't quench fire. Fire won't burn stick. Stick won't beat dog. Dog won't bite pig. Piggy won't get over the stile, and I shan't get home tonight." But the cat said to her, "If you will go to yonder cow and fetch me a saucer of milk, I will kill the rat." So away went the old woman to the cow. But the cow said to her, "If you will go to yonder haystack and fetch me a handful of hay, I'll give you the milk." So away went the old woman to the haystack, and she brought the hay to the cow. As soon as the cow had eaten the hay, she gave the old woman the milk, and away she went with it in a saucer to the cat. As soon as the cat had lapped up the milk, the cat began to kill the rat. The rat began to gnaw the rope. The rope began to hang the butcher. The butcher began to kill the ox. The ox began to drink the water. The water began to quench the fire. The fire began to burn the stick. The stick began to beat the dog. The dog began to bite the pig. The little pig in a fright jumped over the stile, and so the old woman got home that night. End of chapter 4. The Old Woman and Her Pig.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 5. How Jack Went to Seek His Fortune. Once on a time there was a boy named Jack, and one morning he started to go and seek his fortune. He hadn't gone very far before he met a cat. "Where are you going, Jack?" said the cat. "I am going to seek my fortune." "May I go with you?" "Yes," said Jack. "The more the merrier." So on they went, jiggelty-jolt, jiggelty-jolt. They went a little further, and they met a dog. "Where are you going, Jack?" said the dog. "I am going to seek my fortune." "May I go with you?" "Yes," said Jack. "The more the merrier." So on they went, jiggelty-jolt, jiggelty-jolt. They went a little further, and they met a goat. "Where are you going, Jack?" said the goat. "I am going to seek my fortune." "May I go with you?" "Yes," said Jack. "The more the merrier." So on they went, jiggelty-jolt, jiggelty-jolt. They went a little further, and they met a bull. "Where are you going, Jack?" said the bull. "I am going to seek my fortune." "May I go with you?" "Yes," said Jack. "The more the merrier." So on they went, jiggelty-jolt, jiggelty-jolt. They went a little further, and they met a rooster. "Where are you going, Jack?" said the rooster. "I am going to seek my fortune." "May I go with you?" "Yes," said Jack. "The more the merrier." So on they went, jiggelty-jolt, jiggelty-jolt. Well, they went on till it was about dark, and they began to think of some place where they could spend the night. About this time they came in sight of a house, and Jack told them to keep still while he went up and looked in through the window. And there were some robbers counting over the money. Then Jack went back and told them to wait till he gave the word, and then to make all the noise they could. So when they were all ready, Jack gave the word, and the cat mewed, and the dog barked, and the goat bleated, and the bull bellowed, and the rooster crowed, and all together they made such a dreadful noise that it frightened the robbers all away. And then they went in and took possession of the house.
Jack was afraid the robbers would come back in the night, and so when it came time to go to bed, he put the cat in the rocking chair, and he put the dog under the table, and he put the goat upstairs, and he put the bull down cellar, and the rooster flew up onto the roof, and Jack went to bed. By and by the robbers saw it was all dark, and they sent one man back to the house to look after their money. Before long he came back in a great fright, and told them his story. "I went back to the house," said he, "and went in and tried to sit down in the rocking chair, and there was an old woman knitting, and she stuck her knitting needles into me." That was the cat, you know. "I went to the table to look after the money, and there was a shoemaker under the table, and he stuck his awl into me." That was the dog, you know. "I started to go upstairs, and there was a man up there threshing, and he knocked me down with his flail." That was the goat, you know. "I started to go down cellar, and there was a man down there chopping wood, and he knocked me up with his axe." That was the bull, you know. "But I shouldn't have minded all that if it hadn't been for that little fellow on top of the house, who kept a hollering, 'Chuck him up to me! Chuck him up to me!'" Of course, that was the cock-a-doodle-doo. End of chapter 5. How Jack went to seek his fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 6. Mr. Vinegar. Mr. and Mrs. Vinegar lived in a vinegar bottle. Now one day, when Mr. Vinegar was from home, Mrs. Vinegar, who was a very good housewife, was busily sweeping her house, when an unlucky thump of the broom brought the whole house clitter-clatter, about her ears. In an agony of grief, she rushed forth to meet her husband. On seeing him, she exclaimed, "Oh, Mr. Vinegar, Mr. Vinegar, we are ruined! I have knocked the house down, and it is all to pieces." Mr. Vinegar then said, "My dear, let us see what can be done. Here is the door. I will take it on my back, and we will go forth to seek our fortune." They walked all that day, and at nightfall entered a thick forest. They were both very, very tired, and Mr. Vinegar said, "My love, I will climb up into a tree, drag up the door, and you shall follow." He accordingly did so, and they both stretched their weary limbs on the door, and fell fast asleep. In the middle of the night, Mr. Vinegar was disturbed by the sound of voices underneath, and to his horror and dismay, found that it was a band of thieves met to divide their booty. "Here, Jack," said one, "here's £5 for you. Here, Bill, here's £10 for you. Here, Bob, here's £3 for you." Mr. Vinegar could listen no longer. His terror was so great that he trembled and shook down the door on their heads. Away scampered the thieves, but Mr. Vinegar dared not quit his retreat till broad daylight. He then scrambled out of the tree, and went to lift up the door. What did he see but a number of golden guineas? "Come down, Mrs. Vinegar," he cried. "Come down, I say! Our fortune's made! Our fortune's made! Come down, I say!" Mrs. Vinegar got down as fast as she could, and when she saw the money, she jumped for joy. "Now, my dear," said she, "I'll tell you what you shall do. There is a fair at the neighbouring town. You shall take these 40 guineas and buy a cow. I can make butter and cheese, which you shall sell at market, and we shall then be able to live very comfortably." Mr. Vinegar joyfully agrees, takes the money, and off he goes to the fair. When he arrived, he walked up and down, and at length saw a beautiful red cow. It was an excellent milker, and perfect in every way. "Oh," thought Mr. Vinegar, "if I had but that cow, I should be the happiest man alive." So he offers the 40 guineas for the cow, and the owner said that, as he was a friend, he'd oblige him. So the bargain was made, and he got the cow, and he drove it backwards and forwards to show it. By and by he saw a man playing the bagpipes. Tweedledum, tweedledee. The children followed him about, and he appeared to be pocketing money on all sides. "Well," thought Mr. Vinegar, "if I had but that beautiful instrument, I should be the happiest man alive. My fortune would be made." So he went up to the man. "Friend," says he, "what a beautiful instrument that is, and what a deal of money you must make." "Why, yes," said the man, "I make a great deal of money, to be sure, and it is a wonderful instrument." "Oh," cried Mr. Vinegar, "how I should like to possess it." "Well," said the man, "as you are a friend, I don't much mind parting with it. You shall have it for that red cow." "Done," said the delighted Mr. Vinegar. So the beautiful red cow was given for the bagpipes. He walked up and down with his purchase, but it was in vain he tried to play a tune, and instead of pocketing pence, the boys followed him hooting, laughing, and pelting. Poor Mr. Vinegar! His fingers grew very cold, and just as he was leaving the town, he met a man with a fine thick pair of gloves. "Oh, my fingers are so very cold," said Mr. Vinegar to himself. "Now if I had but those beautiful gloves, I should be the happiest man alive." He went up to the man and said to him, "Friend, you seem to have a capital pair of gloves there." "Yes, truly," cried the man, "and my hands are as warm as possible this cold November day." "Well," said Mr. Vinegar, "I should like to have them." "What will you give?" said the man. "As you are a friend, I don't much mind letting you have them for those bagpipes." "Done!" cried Mr. Vinegar. He put on the gloves, and felt perfectly happy as he trudged homewards. At last he grew very tired, when he saw a man coming towards him with a good stout stick in his hand. "Oh," said Mr. Vinegar, "that I had but that stick, I should then be the happiest man alive." He said to the man, "Friend, what a rare good stick you have got." "Yes," said the man, "I have used it for many a long mile, and a good friend it has been. But if you have a fancy for it, as you are a friend, I don't mind giving it to you for that pair of gloves." Mr. Vinegar's hands were so warm, and his legs so tired, that he gladly made the exchange. As he drew near to the wood where he had left his wife, he heard a parrot on a tree calling out his name. "Mr. Vinegar, you foolish man, you blockhead, you simpleton, you went to the fair, and laid out all your money in buying a cow. Not content with that, you changed it for bagpipes on which you could not play, and which were not worth 1/10 of the money. You fool, you had no sooner got the bagpipes than you changed them for the gloves, which were not worth 1/4 of the money. And when you had got the gloves, you changed them for a poor miserable stick. And now for your 40 guineas, cow, bagpipes, and gloves, you have nothing to show but that poor miserable stick, which you might have cut in any hedge." On this the bird laughed and laughed, and Mr. Vinegar, falling into a violent rage, threw the stick at its head. The stick lodged in the tree, and he returned to his wife without money, cow, bagpipes, gloves, or stick, and she instantly gave him such a sound cudgelling that she almost broke every bone in his skin. End of Chapter 6. Mr. Vinegar. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan.
English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 7. Nix Nought Nothing. There once lived a king and a queen, as many a one has been. They were long married and had no children. But at last a baby boy came to the queen, when the king was away in the far countries. The queen would not christen the boy till the king came back, and she said, "We will just call him Nix Nought Nothing until his father comes home." But it was long before he came home, and the boy had grown a nice little laddie. At length the king was on his way back, but he had a big river to cross, and there was a whirlpool, but he could not get over the water. But a giant came up to him and said, "I'll carry you over." But the king said, "What's your pay?" "Oh, give me Nix Nought Nothing, and I will carry you over the water on my back." The king had never heard that his son was called Nix Nought Nothing, and so he said, "Oh, I'll give you that and my thanks into the bargain." When the king got home again, he was very happy to see his wife again, and his young son. She told him that she had not given the child any name, but just Nix Nought Nothing, until he should come home again himself. The poor king was in a terrible case. He said, "What have I done? I promised to give the giant who carried me over the river on his back Nix Nought Nothing." The king and the queen were sad and sorry, but they said, "When the giant comes, we will give him the henwife's boy. He will never know the difference." The next day the giant came to claim the king's promise, and he sent for the henwife's boy, and the giant went away with the boy on his back. He travelled till he came to a big stone, and there he sat down to rest. He said, "Hidge Hodge on my back, what time of day is that?" The poor little boy said, "It is the time that my mother, the henwife, takes up the eggs for the queen's breakfast." The giant was very angry, and dashed the boy's head on the stone, and killed him. So he went back in a tower of temper, and this time they gave him the gardener's boy. He went off with him on his back, till they got to the stone again, when the giant sat down to rest. And he said, "Hidge Hodge on my back, what time of day do you make that?" The gardener's boy said, "Sure it's the time that my mother takes up the vegetables for the queen's dinner." Then the giant was right wild, and dashed his brains out on the stone. Then the giant went back to the king's house in a terrible temper, and said he would destroy them all if they did not give him Nix Nought Nothing this time. They had to do it, and when he came to the big stone the giant said, "What time of day is that?" Nix Nought Nothing said, "It is the time that my father the king will be sitting down to supper." The giant said, "I've got the right one now," and took Nix Nought Nothing to his own house, and brought him up till he was a man. The giant had a bonny daughter, and she and the lad grew very fond of each other. The giant said one day to Nix Nought Nothing, "I've work for you tomorrow. There is a stable 7 miles long and 7 miles broad, and it has not been cleaned for 7 years, and you must clean it tomorrow, or I will have you for my supper." The giant's daughter went out next morning with the lad's breakfast, and found him in a terrible state, for always, as he cleaned out a bit, it just fell in again. The giant's daughter said she would help him, and she cried all the beasts in the field, and all the fowls of the air, and in a minute they all came, and carried away everything that was in the stable, and made it all clean before the giant came home. He said, "Shame on the wit that helped you, but I have a worse job for you tomorrow." Then he said to Nix Nought Nothing, "There's a lake 7 miles long, and 7 miles deep, and 7 miles broad, and you must drain it tomorrow by nightfall, or else I'll have you for my supper." Nix Nought Nothing began early next morning, and tried to lave the water with his pail,
But the lake was never getting any less, and he didn't know what to do. But the giant's daughter called on all the fish in the sea to come and drink the water, and very soon they drank it dry. When the giant saw the work done, he was in a rage and said, "I've a worse job for you tomorrow. There is a tree 7 miles high and no branch on it, till you get to the top, and there is a nest with 7 eggs in it, and you must bring down all the eggs without breaking one, or else I'll have you for my supper." At first the giant's daughter did not know how to help Nix Nought Nothing. She cut off first her fingers and then her toes, and made steps of them, and he clomb the tree and got all the eggs safe till he came just to the bottom, and then one was broken. So they determined to run away together, and after the giant's daughter had tidied up her hair a bit and got her magic flask, they set out together as fast as they could run. And they hadn't got but 3 fields away when they looked back and saw the giant walking along at top speed after them. "Quick, quick!" called out the giant's daughter. "Take my comb from my hair and throw it down." Nix Nought Nothing took her comb from her hair and threw it down, and out of every one of its prongs there sprung up a fine thick briar in the way of the giant. You may be sure it took him a long time to work his way through the briar bush, and by the time he was well through, Nix Nought Nothing and his sweetheart had run on a tidy step away from him. But he soon came along after them, and was just like to catch him up when the giant's daughter called out to Nix Nought Nothing, "Take my hair dagger and throw it down, quick, quick!" So Nix Nought Nothing threw down the hair dagger, and out of it grew as quick as lightning a thick hedge of sharp razors placed criss-cross. The giant had to tread very cautiously to get through all this, and meanwhile the young lovers ran on and on and on, till they were nearly out of sight. But at last the giant was through, and it wasn't long before he was like to catch them up. But just as he was stretching out his hand to catch Nix Nought Nothing, his daughter took out her magic flask and dashed it on the ground. And as it broke, out of it welled a big, big wave that grew and that grew, till it reached the giant's waist, and then his neck, and when it got to his head, he was drowned dead, and dead, and dead indeed. So he goes out of the story. But Nix Nought Nothing fled on till where do you think they came to? Why, to near the castle of Nix Nought Nothing's father and mother. But the giant's daughter was so weary that she couldn't move a step further. So Nix Nought Nothing told her to wait there while he went and found out a lodging for the night. And he went on towards the lights of the castle, and on the way he came to the cottage of the henwife, whose boy had had his brains dashed out by the giant. Now she knew Nix Nought Nothing in a moment, and hated him because he was the cause of her son's death. So when he asked his way to the castle, she put a spell upon him, and when he got to the castle, no sooner was he let in than he fell down dead asleep upon a bench in the hall. The king and queen tried all they could do to wake him up, but all in vain. So the king promised that if any lady could wake him up, she should marry him. Meanwhile, the giant's daughter was waiting and waiting for him to come back, and she went up into a tree to watch for him. The gardener's daughter, going to draw water in the well, saw the shadow of the lady in the water, and thought it was herself, and said, "If I'm so bonny, if I'm so brave, why do you send me to draw water?" So she threw down her pail, and went to see if she could wed the sleeping stranger. And she went to the henwife, who taught her an unspelling catch, which would keep Nix Nought Nothing awake as long as the gardener's daughter liked. So she went up to the castle and sang her catch, and Nix Nought Nothing was wakened for a bit, and they promised to wed him to the gardener's daughter. Meanwhile, the gardener went down to draw water from the well, and saw the shadow of the lady in the water. So he looks up and finds her, and he brought the lady from the tree, and led her into his house. And he told her that a stranger was to marry his daughter, and took her up to the castle, and showed her the man. And it was Nix Nought Nothing asleep in a chair. And she saw him, and cried to him, "Waken, waken, and speak to me." But he would not waken, and soon she cried, "I cleaned the stable, I laved the lake, and I clomb the tree, and all for the love of thee, and thou wilt not waken and speak to me." The king and the queen heard this, and came to the bonny young lady, and she said, "I cannot get Nix Nought Nothing to speak to me for all that I can do." Then were they greatly astonished when she spoke of Nix Nought Nothing, and asked where he was, and she said, "He that sits there in the chair." Then they ran to him and kissed him, and called him their own dear son. So they called for the gardener's daughter, and made her sing her charm, and he wakened, and told them all that the giant's daughter had done for him, and of all her kindness. Then they took her in their arms, and kissed her, and said she should now be their daughter, for their son should marry her. But they sent for the henwife, and put her to death. And they lived happy all their days. End of chapter 7. Nix Nought Nothing. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 8. Jack Hannaford. There was an old soldier who had been long in the wars, so long that he was quite out at elbows, and he did not know where to go to find a living. So he walked up moors, down glens, till at last he came to a farm, from which the good man had gone away to market. The wife of the farmer was a very foolish woman, who had been a widow when he married her. The farmer was foolish enough too, and it is hard to say which of the two was the more foolish. When you've heard my tale, you may decide. Now before the farmer goes to market, says he to his wife, "Here is 10 pounds all in gold. Take care of it till I come home." If the man had not been a fool, he would never have given the money to his wife to keep. Well, off he went in his cart to market, and the wife said to herself, "I will keep the 10 pounds quite safe from thieves." So she tied it up in a rag, and she put the rag up the parlour chimney. "There," said she, "no thieves will ever find it now, that is quite sure." Jack Hannaford, the old soldier, came and rapped at the door. "Who is there?" asked the wife. "Jack Hannaford." "Where do you come from?" "Paradise." "Lord a mercy, and maybe you've seen my old man there," alluding to her former husband. "Yes, I have." "And how was he a-doing?" asked the goody. "But middling. He cobbles old shoes, and he has nothing but cabbage for victuals." "Deary me!" exclaimed the woman. "Didn't he send a message to me?" "Yes, he did," replied Jack Hannaford. "He said that he was out of leather, and his pockets were empty, so you were to send him a few shillings to buy a fresh stock of leather." "He shall have them, bless his poor soul!" And away went the wife to the parlour chimney, and she pulled the rag with the 10 pounds in it from the chimney, and she gave the whole sum to the soldier, telling him that her old man was to use as much as he wanted, and to send back the rest. It was not long that Jack waited after receiving the money. He went off as fast as he could. Presently the farmer came home and asked his wife for his money. The wife told him that she had sent it by a soldier to her former husband in Paradise, to buy him leather for cobbling the shoes of the saints and angels of heaven. The farmer was very angry, and he saw that he had never met with such a fool as his wife. But the wife said that her husband was a greater fool for letting her have the money. There was no time to waste words, so the farmer mounted his horse and rode off after Jack Hannaford. The old soldier heard the horse's hoofs clattering on the road behind him, so he knew it must be the farmer pursuing him. He lay down on the ground, and shading his eyes with one hand, looked up into the sky,
and pointed heavenwards with the other hand. "What are you about there?" asked the farmer, pulling up. "Lord save you!" exclaimed Jack. "I've seen a rare sight." "What was that?" "A man going straight up into the sky as if he were walking on a road." "Can you see him still?" "Yes, I can." "Where?" "Get off your horse and lie down." "If you will hold the horse." Jack did so readily. "I cannot see him," said the farmer. "Shade your eyes with your hand, and you'll soon see a man flying away from you." Sure enough he did so, for Jack leapt on the horse and rode away with it. The farmer walked home without his horse. "You are a bigger fool than I am," said the wife, "for I did only one foolish thing, and you have done two." End of Chapter 8. Jack Hannaford. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 9. Binnorie. Once upon a time, there were two kings' daughters lived in a bower near the bonny mill dams of Binnorie. And Sir William came wooing the eldest, and won her love, and plighted troth with glove and with ring. But after a time he looked upon the youngest, with her cherry cheeks and golden hair, and his love grew towards her till he cared no longer for the eldest one. So she hated her sister for taking away Sir William's love, and day by day her hate grew upon her, and she plotted and she planned how to get rid of her. So one fine morning, fair and clear, she said to her sister, "Let us go and see our father's boats come in at the bonny mill-stream of Binnorie." So they went there hand in hand, and when they got to the river's bank, the youngest got upon a stone to watch for the coming of the boats. And her sister, coming behind her, caught her round the waist and dashed her into the rushing mill-stream of Binnorie. "O sister, sister, reach me your hand," she cried, as she floated away, "and you shall have half of all I've got or shall get." "No, sister, I'll reach you no hand of mine, for I am the heir to all your land. Shame on me if I touch the hand that has come twixt me and my own heart's love." O sister, then reach me your glove," she cried, as she floated further away, "and you shall have your William again." "Sink on," cried the cruel princess, "no hand or glove of mine you'll touch. Sir William will be all mine when you are sunk beneath the bonny mill-stream of Binnorie." And she turned and went home to the king's castle. And the princess floated down the mill-stream, sometimes swimming and sometimes sinking, till she came near the mill. Now the miller's daughter was cooking that day, and needed water for her cooking. And as she went to draw it from the stream, she saw something floating towards the mill-dam, and she cried out, "Father, father, draw your dam! There's something white, a merry maid or a milk-white swan, coming down the stream." So the miller hastened to the dam, and stopped the heavy cruel mill-wheels. And then they took out the princess and laid her on the bank. Fair and beautiful she looked as she lay there. In her golden hair were pearls and precious stones. You could not see her waist for her golden girdle, and the golden fringe of her white dress came down over her lily feet. But she was drowned, drowned. As she lay there in her beauty, a famous harper passed by the mill-dam of Binnorie, and saw her sweet, pale face. And though he travelled on far way, he never forgot that face, and after many days he came back to the bonny mill-stream of Binnorie. But then all he could find of her, where they had put her to rest, were her bones and her golden hair. So he made a harp out of her breastbone and her hair, and travelled on up the hill from the mill dam of Binnorie, till he came to the castle of the king her father. That night they were all gathered in the castle hall to hear the great harper, king and queen, their daughter and son, Sir William, and all their court. And first the harper sang to his old harp, making them joy and be glad or sorrow and weep, just as he liked. And while he sang he put the harp he had made that day on a stone in the hall. And presently it began to sing by itself, low and clear, and the harper stopped, and all were hushed. And this was what the harp sung. O yonder sits my father, the king, Binnorie, O Binnorie, and yonder sits my mother, the queen, by the bonny mill dams o' Binnorie. And yonder stands my brother Hugh, Binnorie, O Binnorie, and by him my William, false and true, by the bonny mill dams of Binnorie. Then they all wondered, and the harper told them how he had seen the princess lying drowned on the bank near the bonny mill dams of Binnorie, and how he had afterwards made this harp out of her hair and breastbone. Just then the harp began singing again, and this was what it sang, out loud and clear. And there sits my sister who drowned me, by the bonny mill dams of Binnorie. And then the harp snapped and broke, and never sang more. End of Chapter 9. Binnorie.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan.
English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 10. Mouse and Mouser. The mouse went to visit the cat, and found her sitting behind the hall door spinning. Mouse. What are you doing, my lady, my lady? What are you doing, my lady? Cat sharply. I'm spinning old breeches, good body, good body. I'm spinning old breeches, good body. Mouse. Long may you wear them, my lady, my lady. Long may you wear them, my lady. Cat gruffly. I'll wear 'em and tear 'em, good body, good body. I'll wear 'em and tear 'em, good body. Mouse. I was sweeping my room, my lady, my lady. I was sweeping my room, my lady. Cat. The cleaner you'd be, good body, good body. The cleaner you'd be, good body. Mouse. I found a silver sixpence, my lady, my lady. I found a silver sixpence, my lady. Cat. The richer you were, good body, good body. The richer you were, good body. Mouse. I went to the market, my lady, my lady. I went to the market, my lady. Cat. The further you went, good body, good body. The further you went, good body. Mouse. I bought me a pudding, my lady, my lady. I bought me a pudding, my lady. Cat, snarling. The more meat you had, good body, good body. The more meat you had, good body. Mouse. I put it in the window to cool, my lady. I put it in the window to cool. Cat, sharply. The faster you'd eat it, good body, good body. The faster you'd eat it, good body. Mouse, timidly. The cat came and ate it, my lady, my lady. The cat came and ate it, my lady. Cat, pouncingly. And I'll eat you, good body, good body. And I'll eat you, good body. Springs upon the mouse and kills it. End of Chapter 10. Mouse and Mouser.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan.
English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 11. Cap o' Rushes. Well, there was once a very rich gentleman, and he'd 3 daughters, and he thought he'd see how fond they were of him. So he says to the first, "How much do you love me, my dear?" "Why," says she, "as I love my life." "That's good," says he. So he says to the second, "How much do you love me, my dear?" "Why," says she, "better nor all the world." "That's good," says he. So he says to the third, "How much do you love me, my dear?" "Why, I love you as fresh meat loves salt," says she. Well, he was that angry. "You don't love me at all," says he, "and in my house you stay no more." So he drove her out there and then, and shut the door in her face. Well, she went away on, till she came to a fen, and there she gathered a lot of rushes, and made them into a kind of a sort of a cloak with a hood, to cover her from head to foot, and to hide her fine clothes. And then she went on, till she came to a great house. "Do you want a maid?" says she. "No, we don't," said they. "I haven't nowhere to go," says she, "and I ask no wages, and do any sort of work," says she. "Well," says they, "if you like to wash the pots and scrape the saucepans, you may stay," said they. So she stayed there and washed the pots, and scraped the saucepans, and did all the dirty work. And because she gave no name, they called her Cap o' Rushes. Well, one day there was to be a great dance a little way off, and the servants were allowed to go and look on at the grand people. Cap o' Rushes said she was too tired to go, so she stayed at home. But when they were gone, she offed with her cap o' rushes, and cleaned herself, and went to the dance, and no one there was so finely dressed as her. Well, who should be there but her master's son, and what should he do but fall in love with her the minute he set eyes on her. He wouldn't dance with any one else. But before the dance was done, Cap o' Rushes slipped off, and away she went home. And when the other maids came back, she was pretending to be asleep with her cap o' rushes on. Well, next morning they said to her, "You did miss a sight, Cap o' Rushes." "What was that?" says she. "Why, the beautifullest lady you ever see, dressed right gay and ga. The young master, he never took his eyes off her." "Well, I should have liked to have seen her," says Cap o' Rushes. "Well, there's to be another dance this evening, and perhaps she'll be there." But come the evening, Cap o' Rushes said she was too tired to go with them. Howsoever, when they were gone, she offed with her cap o' rushes, and cleaned herself, and away she went to the dance. The master's son had been reckoning on seeing her, and he danced with no one else, and never took his eyes off her. But before the dance was over, she slipped off, and home she went, and when the maids came back, she pretended to be asleep with her cap o' rushes on. Next day they said to her again, "Well, Cap o' Rushes, you should have been there to seen the lady. There she was again, gay and ga, and the young master, he never took his eyes off her." "Well there," says she, "I should ha' liked to ha' seen her." "Well," says they, "there's a dance again this evening, and you must go with us, for she's sure to be there." Well, come this evening, Cap o' Rushes said she was too tired to go, and do what they would, she stayed at home. But when they were gone, she offed with her cap o' rushes, and cleaned herself, and away she went to the dance. The master's son was really glad when he saw her. He danced with none but her, and never took his eyes off her. When she wouldn't tell him her name, nor where she came from, he gave her a ring, and told her if he didn't see her again he should die. Well, before the dance was over, off she slipped, and home she went, and when the maids came home she was pretending to sleep with her cap o' rushes on. Well, next day they says to her, "There, Cap o' Rushes, you didn't come last night, and now you won't see the lady, for there's no more dances." "Well, I should have really liked to have seen her," says she. The master's son, he tried every way to find out where the lady was gone. But go where he might, and ask whom he might, he never heard anything about her, and he got worse and worse for the love of her, till he had to keep his bed. "Make some gruel for the young master," they said to the cook. "He's dying for the love of the lady." The cook she set about making it when Cap o' Rushes came in. "What are you a-doing of?" says she. "I'm going to make some gruel for the young master," says the cook, "for he's dying for love of the lady." "Let me make it," says Cap o' Rushes. Well, the cook wouldn't at first, but at last she said yes, and Cap o' Rushes made the gruel. And when she had made it, she slipped the ring into it on the sly, before the cook took it upstairs. The young man he drank it, and then he saw the ring at the bottom. "Send for the cook," says he. So up she comes. "Who made this gruel here?" says he. "I did," says the cook, for she was frightened. And he looked at her. "No, you didn't," says he. "Say who did it, and you shan't be harmed." "Well, then, 'twas Cap o' Rushes," says she. "Send Cap o' Rushes here," says he. So Cap o' Rushes came. "Did you make my gruel?" says he. "Yes, I did," says she. "Where did you get this ring?" says he. "From him that gave it me," says she. "Who are you, then?" says the young man. "I'll show you," says she, and she offed with her Cap o' Rushes, and there she was in her beautiful clothes. Well, the master's son he got well very soon, and they were to be married in a little time. It was to be a very grand wedding, and every one was asked far and near. And Cap o' Rushes' father was asked, but she never told anybody who she was. But before the wedding she went to the cook, and says she, "I want you to dress every dish without a mite o' salt." "That'll be rare nasty," says the cook. "That doesn't signify," says she. "Very well," says the cook. Well, the wedding day came, and they were married. And after they were married, all the company sat down to the dinner. When they began to eat the meat, that was so tasteless they couldn't eat it. But Cap o' Rushes' father he tried first one dish, and then another, and then he burst out crying. "What is the matter?" said the master's son to him. "Oh," says he, "I had a daughter, and I asked her how much she loved me, and she said, as much as fresh meat loves salt. And I turned her from my door, for I thought she didn't love me. And now I see she loved me best of all, and she may be dead for aught I know." "No, father, here she is," says Cap o' Rushes, as she goes up to him and puts her arms round him. And so they were happy ever after. End of chapter 11. Cap o' Rushes.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 12. Teeny Tiny. Once upon a time, there was a teeny tiny woman lived in a teeny tiny house in a teeny tiny village. Now one day, this teeny tiny woman put on her teeny tiny bonnet and went out of her teeny tiny house to take a teeny tiny walk. And when this teeny tiny woman had gone a teeny tiny way, she came to a teeny tiny gate. So the teeny tiny woman opened the teeny tiny gate and went into a teeny tiny churchyard. And when this teeny tiny woman had got into the teeny tiny churchyard, she saw a teeny tiny bone on a teeny tiny grave. And the teeny tiny woman said to her teeny tiny self, "This teeny tiny bone will make me some teeny tiny soup for my teeny tiny supper." So the teeny tiny woman put the teeny tiny bone into her teeny tiny pocket and went home to her teeny tiny house. Now when the teeny tiny woman got home to her teeny tiny house, she was a teeny tiny bit tired. So she went up her teeny tiny stairs to her teeny tiny bed, and put the teeny tiny bone into a teeny tiny cupboard. And when this teeny tiny woman had been to sleep a teeny tiny time, she was awakened by a teeny tiny voice from the teeny tiny cupboard, which said, "Give me my bone." And this teeny tiny woman was a teeny tiny frightened, so she hid her teeny tiny head under the teeny tiny clothes, and went to sleep again. And when she had been to sleep again a teeny tiny time, the teeny tiny voice again cried out from the teeny tiny cupboard, a teeny tiny louder, "Give me my bone." This made the teeny tiny woman a teeny tiny more frightened, so she hid her teeny tiny head a teeny tiny further under the teeny tiny clothes. And when the teeny tiny woman had been to sleep again a teeny tiny time, the teeny tiny voice from the teeny tiny cupboard said again a teeny tiny louder, "Give me my bone." And this teeny tiny woman was a teeny tiny bit more frightened, but she put her teeny tiny head out of the teeny tiny clothes, and said in her loudest teeny tiny voice, "Take it." End of chapter 12. Teeny Tiny. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 13. Jack and the Beanstalk. There was once upon a time a poor widow who had an only son named Jack, and a cow named Milky White. And all they had to live on was the milk the cow gave every morning, which they carried to the market and sold. But one morning Milky White gave no milk, and they didn't know what to do. "What shall we do? What shall we do?" said the widow, wringing her hands. "Cheer up, mother. I'll go and get work somewhere," said Jack. "We've tried that before, and nobody would take you," said his mother. "We must sell Milky White, and with the money do something, start shop or something." "All right, mother," says Jack. "It's market day today, and I'll soon sell Milky White, and then we'll see what we can do." So he took the cow's halter in his hand, and off he starts. He hadn't gone far when he met a funny-looking old man who said to him, "Good morning, Jack." "Good morning to you," said Jack, and wondered how he knew his name. "Well, Jack, and where are you off to?" said the man. "I'm going to market to sell our cow here." "Oh, you look the proper sort of chap to sell cows," said the man. "I wonder if you know how many beans make 5. "2 in each hand and 1 in your mouth," says Jack, as sharp as a needle. "Right you are," said the man. "And here they are, the very beans themselves," he went on, pulling out of his pocket a number of strange-looking beans. "As you are so sharp," says he, "I don't mind doing a swap with you, your cow, for these beans." "Walker," says Jack, "wouldn't you like it?" "Ah, you don't know what these beans are," said the man. "If you plant them overnight, by morning they grow right up to the sky." "Really?" says Jack. "You don't say so." "Yes, that is so, and if it doesn't turn out to be true, you can have your cow back." "Right," says Jack, and hands him over Milky White's halter and pockets the beans. Back goes Jack home, and as he hadn't gone very far, it wasn't dusk by the time he got to his door. "What, back, Jack?" said his mother. "I see you haven't got Milky White, so you've sold her. How much did you get for her?" "You'll never guess, mother," says Jack. "No, you don't say so. Good boy. 5 pounds? 10? 15? No, it can't be 20. "I told you couldn't guess. What do you say to these beans? They're magical. Plant them overnight and—" "What?" says Jack's mother. "Have you been such a fool, such a dolt, such an idiot, as to give away my Milky White, the best milker in the parish, and prime beef to boot, for a set of paltry beans? Take that! Take that! Take that! And as for your precious beans, here they go out of the window. And now off with you to bed. Not a sup shall you drink, and not a bit shall you swallow this very night." So Jack went upstairs to his little room in the attic, and sad and sorry he was, to be sure, as much for his mother's sake as for the loss of his supper. At last he dropped off to sleep. When he woke up, the room looked so funny. The sun was shining into part of it, and yet all the rest was quite dark and shady. So Jack jumped up and dressed himself and went to the window. And what do you think he saw? Why, the beans his mother had thrown out of the window into the garden had sprung up into a big beanstalk, which went up and up and up till it reached the sky. So the man spoke truth after all. The beanstalk grew up quite close past Jack's window, so all he had to do was to open it and give a jump onto the beanstalk, which was made like a big plaited ladder. So Jack climbed and he 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 climbed, till at last he reached the sky. And when he got there, he found a long, broad road going as straight as a dart. So he walked along and he walked along and he walked along till he came to a great big tall house, and on the doorstep there was a great big tall woman. "Good morning, Mum," says Jack, quite polite-like. "Should you be so kind as to give me some breakfast?" For he hadn't had anything to eat, you know, the night before, and was as hungry as a hunter. "It's breakfast you want, is it?" says the great big tall woman. "It's breakfast you'll be if you don't move off from here. My man is an ogre, and there's nothing he likes better than boys broiled on toast. You'd better be moving on, or he'll soon be coming." "Oh, please, Mum, do give me something to eat, Mum. I've had nothing to eat since yesterday morning, really and truly, Mum," says Jack. "I may as well be broiled as die of hunger." Well, the ogre's wife wasn't such a bad sort after all, so she took Jack into the kitchen and gave him a junk of bread and cheese and a jug of milk. But Jack hadn't half finished these when, thump, 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 the whole house began to tremble with the noise of someone coming. "Goodness gracious me, it's my old man," said the ogre's wife. "What on earth shall I do? Here, come quick and jump in here." And she bundled Jack into the oven just as the ogre came in. He was a big one, to be sure. At his belt he had 3 calves strung up by the heels, and he unhooked them and threw them down on the table and said, "Here, wife, broil me a couple of these for breakfast." "Ah, what's this I smell? Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll have his bones to grind my bread." "Nonsense, dear," said his wife, "you're dreaming. Or perhaps you smell the scraps of that little boy you liked so much for yesterday's dinner. Here, go you and have a wash and tidy up, and by the time you come back your breakfast will be ready for you." So the ogre went off, and Jack was just going to jump out of the oven and run off when the woman told him not. "Wait till he's asleep," says she. "He always has a snooze after breakfast." Well, the ogre had his breakfast, and after that he goes to a big chest and takes out of it a couple of bags of gold, and sits down counting them, till at last his head began to nod, and he began to snore till the whole house shook again. Then Jack crept out on tiptoe from his oven, and as he was passing the ogre, he took one of the bags of gold under his arm, and off he pelters till he came to the beanstalk. And then he threw down the bag of gold, which of course fell into his mother's garden, and then he climbed down and climbed down, till at last he got home and told his mother and showed her the gold and said, "Well, mother, wasn't I right about the beans? They are really magical, you see." So they lived on the bag of gold for some time, but at last they came to the end of that, so Jack made up his mind to try his luck once more up at the top of the beanstalk. So one fine morning he got up early and got onto the beanstalk, and he climbed 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 and he climbed, till at last he had got on the road again, and came to the great big tall house he had been to before. There, sure enough, was the great big tall woman a-standing on the doorstep. "Good morning, Mum," says Jack, as bold as brass. "Could you be so good as to give me something to eat?" "Go away, my boy," said the big tall woman, "or else my man will eat you up for breakfast. But aren't you the youngster who came here once before? Do you know, that very day my man missed one of his bags of gold?" "That's strange, Mum," says Jack. "I dare say I could tell you something about that, but I'm so hungry I can't speak till I've had something to eat." Well, the big tall woman was that curious that she took him in and gave him something to eat. But he had scarcely began munching it, as slowly as he could, when thump, 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 they heard the giant's footstep, and his wife hid Jack away in the oven. All happened as it did before. In came the ogre as he did before, said, "Fee, fi, fo, fum," and had his breakfast of 3 broiled oxen. Then he said, "Wife, bring me the hen that lays the golden eggs." So she brought it, and the ogre said, "Lay," and it laid an egg all of gold. And then the ogre began to nod his head, and to snore till the house shook. Then Jack crept out of the oven on tiptoe, and caught hold of the golden hen, and was off before you could say Jack Robinson. But this time the hen gave a cackle which woke the ogre, and just as Jack got out of the house he heard him calling, "Wife, wife, what have you done with my golden hen?" And the wife said, "Why, my dear?" But that was all Jack heard, for he rushed off to the beanstalk, and climbed down like a house on fire. And when he got home he showed his mother the wonderful hen, and said, "Lay," to it. And it laid a golden egg every time he said lay. Well, Jack was not content, and it wasn't very long before he determined to have another try at his luck up there at the top of the beanstalk. So one fine morning he got up early, and went on to the beanstalk. And he climbed and he climbed, and he climbed and he climbed, till he got to the top. But this time he knew better than to go straight to the ogre's house. And when he got near it, he waited behind a bush, till he saw the ogre's wife come out with a pail to get some water. And then he crept into the house and got into the copper. He hadn't been there long when he heard thump, 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 as before, and in come the ogre and his wife. "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman," cried out the ogre. "I smell him, wife, I smell him." "Do you, my dearie?" says the ogre's wife. "Then if it's that little rogue that stole your gold, and the hen that laid the golden eggs, he's sure to have got into the oven." And they both rushed to the oven, but Jack wasn't there, luckily. And the ogre's wife said, "There you are again with your fee, fi, fo, fum. Why, of course it's the laddie you caught last night that I've broiled for your breakfast. How forgetful I am, and how careless you are not to tell the difference between a live un and a dead un." So the ogre sat down to the breakfast and ate it. But every now and then he would mutter, "Well, I could have sworn," and he'd get up and search the larder and the cupboards and everything, only luckily he didn't think of the copper. After breakfast was over, the ogre called out, "Wife, wife, bring me my golden harp." So she brought it and put it on the table before him. Then he said, "Sing," and the golden harp sang most beautifully, and it went on singing till the ogre fell asleep, and commenced to snore like thunder. Then Jack lifted up the copper lid very quietly, and got down like a mouse, and crept on hands and knees, till he got to the table, when he got up, and caught hold of the golden harp, and dashed with it towards the door. But the harp called out quite loud, "Master, master!" and the ogre woke up just in time to see Jack running off with his harp. Jack ran as fast as he could, and the ogre came rushing after, and would soon have caught him, only Jack had a start, and dodged him a bit, and knew where he was going. When he got to the beanstalk, the ogre was not more than 20 yards away, when suddenly he saw Jack disappear like. And when he got up to the end of the road, he saw Jack underneath climbing down for dear life. Well, the ogre didn't like trusting himself to such a ladder, and he stood and waited, so Jack got another start. But just then the harp cried out, "Master, master!" and the ogre swung himself down onto the beanstalk, which shook with his weight. Down climbs Jack, and after him climbed the ogre. By this time Jack had climbed down and climbed down and climbed down till he was very nearly home. So he called out, "Mother, mother, bring me an axe, bring me an axe!" And his mother came rushing out with the axe in her hand. But when she came to the beanstalk, she stood stock still with fright, for there she saw the ogre just coming down below the clouds. But Jack jumped down and got hold of the axe and gave a chop at the beanstalk, which cut it half in two. The ogre felt the beanstalk shake and quiver, so he stopped to see what was the matter. Then Jack gave another chop with the axe, and the beanstalk was cut in two and began to topple over. Then the ogre fell down and broke his crown, and the beanstalk came toppling after. Then Jack showed his mother his golden harp, and what with showing that and selling the golden eggs, Jack and his mother became very rich, and he married a great princess, and they lived happy ever after.
End of chapter 13. Jack and the Beanstalk.
Ever after. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 14. The Story of the Three Little Pigs. Once upon a time when pigs spoke rhyme, and monkeys chewed tobacco, and hens took snuff to make them tough, and ducks went quack, quack, quacko. There was an old sow with 3 little pigs, and as she had not enough to keep them, she sent them out to seek their fortune. The first that went off met a man with a bundle of straw and said to him, "Please, man, give me that straw to build me a house." Which the man did, and the little pig built a house with it. Presently came along a wolf and knocked at the door and said, little pig, let me come in." To which the pig answered, "No, no, by the hair of my chinny chin chin." The wolf then answered to that, "Then I'll huff and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in." So he huffed, and he puffed, and he blew his house in, and ate up the little pig. The second little pig met a man with a bundle of furs, and said, "Please, man, give me that furs to build a house." Which the man did, and the pig built his house. Then along came the wolf and said, little pig, let me come in." "No, no, by the hair of my chinny chin chin." "Then I'll puff and I'll huff, and I'll blow your house in." So he huffed and he puffed, and he puffed and he huffed, and at last he blew the house down, and he ate up the little pig. The third little pig met a man with a load of bricks, and said, "Please, man, give me those bricks to build a house with." So the man gave him the bricks, and he built his house with them. So the wolf came, as he did to the other little pigs, and said, little pig, let me come in." "No, no, by the hair of my chinny chin chin." "Then I'll huff and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in." Well, he huffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, and he puffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, but he could not get the house down. When he found that he could not, with all his huffing and puffing, blow the house down, he said, "Little pig, I know where there is a nice field of turnips." "Where?" said the little pig. "Oh, in Mr. Smith's home field, and if you will be ready tomorrow morning, I will call for you, and we will go together and get some for dinner." "Very well," said the little pig. "I will be ready. What time do you mean to go?" "Oh, at 6 o'clock." Well, the little pig got up at 5, and got the turnips before the wolf came, which he did about 6, and he said, "Little pig, are you ready?" The little pig said, "Ready? I have been and come back again and got a nice potful for dinner." The wolf felt very angry at this, but thought that he would be up to the little pig somehow or other, so he said, "Little pig, I know where there is a nice apple tree." "Where?" said the pig. "Down at Merry Garden," replied the wolf, "and if you will not deceive me, I will come for you at 5 o'clock tomorrow and get some apples." Well, the little pig bustled up the next morning at 4 o'clock and went off for the apples, to go back before the wolf came. But he had further to go and had to climb the tree, so that just as he was coming down from it, he saw the wolf coming, which, as you may suppose, frightened him very much. When the wolf came up, he said, "Little pig, what? Are you here before me? Are they nice apples?" "Yes, very," said the little pig. "I will throw you down one." And he threw it so far that, while the wolf was gone to pick it up, the little pig jumped down and ran home. The next day the wolf came again and said to the little pig, "Little pig, there is a fair at Shanklin this afternoon. Will you go?" "Oh, yes," said the pig, "I will go. What time shall you be ready?" "At 3," said the wolf. So the little pig went off before the time as usual, and got to the fair and bought a butter churn, which he was going home with when he saw the wolf coming. Then he could not tell what to do, so he got into the churn to hide, and by so doing turned it round, and it rolled down the hill with the pig in it, which frightened the wolf so much that he ran home without going to the fair. He went to the little pig's house and told him how frightened he had been by a great round thing which came down the hill past him. Then the little pig said, "Ha! I frightened you then. I had been to the fair and bought a butter churn, and when I saw you I got into it and rolled down the hill." Then the wolf was very angry indeed, and declared he would eat up the little pig, and that he would get down the chimney after him. When the little pig saw what he was about, he hung on the pot full of water and made up a blazing fire, and, just as the wolf was coming down, took off the cover, and in fell the wolf. So the little pig put on the cover again in an instant, boiled him up, and ate him for supper, and lived happy ever afterwards. End of chapter 14. The story of the 3 little pigs.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 15. The Master and His Pupil. There was once a very learned man in the North Country, who knew all the languages under the sun, and who was acquainted with all the mysteries of creation. He had one big book bound in black calf and clasped with iron, and with iron corners, and chained to a table which was made fast to the floor. And when he read out of this book, he unlocked it with an iron key, and none but he read from it, for it contained all the secrets of the spiritual world. It told how many angels there were in heaven, and how they marched in their ranks, and sang in their choirs, and what were their several functions, and what was the name of each great angel of might. And it told of the demons, how many of them there were, and what were their several powers, and their labours, and their names, and how they might be summoned, and how tasks might be imposed on them, and how they might be chained to be as slaves to man. Now the master had a pupil, who was but a foolish lad, and he acted as servant to the great master, but never was he suffered to look into the black book, hardly to enter the private room. One day the master was out, and then the lad, as curious as could be, hurried to the chamber where his master kept his wondrous apparatus for changing copper into gold, and lead into silver, and where was his mirror, in which he could see all that was passing in the world, and where was the shell which, when held to the ear, whispered all the words that were being spoken by anyone that the master desired to know. The lad tried in vain with the crucibles to turn copper and lead into gold and silver. He looked long and vainly into the mirror. Smoke and clouds passed over it, but he saw nothing plain.
and the shell to his ear produced only indistinct murmurings, like the breaking of distant seas on an unknown shore. "I can do nothing," he said, "as I don't know the right words to utter, and they are locked up in yon book." He looked round, and see, the book was unfastened. The master had forgotten to lock it before he went out. The boy rushed to it and unclosed the volume. It was written with red and black ink, and much of it he could not understand, but he put his finger on a line and spelled it through. At once the room was darkened, and the house trembled. A clap of thunder rolled through the passage and the old room, and there stood before him a horrible, horrible form, breathing fire, and with eyes like burning lamps. It was the demon Beelzebub, whom he had called up to serve him. "Set me a task," said he, with a voice like the roaring of an iron furnace. The boy only trembled, and his hair stood up. "Set me a task, or I shall strangle thee." But the lad could not speak. Then the evil spirit stepped towards him, and putting forth his hand touched his throat. The fingers burned his flesh. "Set me a task." "Water yon flower," cried the boy in despair, pointing to a geranium which stood in a pot on the floor. Instantly the spirit left the room, but in another instant he returned with a barrel on his back, and poured its contents over the flower. And again he went and came, and poured more and more water, till the floor of the room was ankle deep. "Enough, enough!" gasped the lad. But the demon heeded him not. The lad didn't know the words by which to send him away, and still he fetched water. It rose to the boy's knees, and still more water was poured. It mounted to his waist, and Beelzebub still kept on bringing barrels full. It rose to his armpits, and he scrambled to the table-top. And now the water in the room stood up to the window and washed against the glass, and swirled around his feet on the table. It still rose. It reached his breast. In vain he cried. The evil spirit would not be dismissed, and to this day he would have been pouring water, and would have drowned all Yorkshire. But the master remembered on his journey that he had not locked his book, and therefore returned, and at the moment when the water was bubbling about the pupil's chin, rushed into the room and spoke the words which cast Beelzebub back into his fiery home.
End of chapter 15. The Master and His Pupil.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 16. Titty Mouse and Tatty Mouse. Titty Mouse and Tatty Mouse both lived in a house. Titty Mouse went a-leasing, and Tatty Mouse went a-leasing. So they both went a-leasing. Titty Mouse leased an ear of corn, and Tatty Mouse leased an ear of corn. So they both leased an ear of corn. Titty Mouse made a pudding, and Tatty Mouse made a pudding. So they both made a pudding. And Tatty Mouse put her pudding into the pot to boil. But when Titty went to put hers in, the pot tumbled over, and scalded her to death. Then Tatty sat down and wept. Then a three-legged stool said, "Tatty, why do you weep?" "Titty's dead," said Tatty, "and so I weep." "Then," said the stool, "I'll hop." So the stool hopped. Then a broom in the corner of the room said, "Stool, why do you hop?" "Oh," said the stool, "Titty's dead, and Tatty weeps, and so I hop." "Then," said the broom, "I'll sweep." So the broom began to sweep. "Then," said the door, "Broom, why do you sweep?" "Oh," said the broom, "Titty's dead, and Tatty weeps, and the stool hops, and so I sweep." "Then," said the door, "I'll jar." So the door jarred. "Then," said the window, "Door, why do you jar?" "Oh," said the door, "Titty's dead, and Tatty weeps, and the stool hops, and the broom sweeps, and so I jar." "Then," said the window,
I'll creak." So the window creaked. Now there was an old form outside the house, and when the window creaked, the form said, "Window, why do you creak?" "Oh," said the window, "Titty's dead and Tatty weeps, and the stool hops and the broom sweeps, the door jars, and so I creak." "Then," said the old form, "I'll run round the house." Then the old form ran round the house. Now there was a fine large walnut tree growing by the cottage, and the tree said to the form, "Form, why do you run round the house?" "Oh," said the form, "Titty's dead and Tatty weeps, and the stool hops and the broom sweeps, the door jars and the window creaks, and so I run round the house." "Then," said the walnut tree, "I'll shed my leaves." So the walnut tree shed all its beautiful green leaves. Now there was a little bird perched on one of the boughs of the tree, and when all the leaves fell, it said, "Walnut tree, why do you shed your leaves?" "Oh," said the tree, "Titty's dead and Tatty weeps, the stool hops and the broom sweeps, the door jars and the window creaks, the old form runs round the house, and so I shed my leaves." "Then," said the little bird, "I'll moult all my feathers." So he moulted all his pretty feathers. Now there was a little girl walking below, carrying a jug of milk for her brothers' and sisters' supper, and when she saw the poor little bird moult all its feathers, she said, "Little bird, why do you moult all your feathers?" "Oh," said the little bird, "Titty's dead and Tatty weeps, the stool hops and the broom sweeps, the door jars and the window creaks, the old form runs round the house, the walnut tree sheds its leaves, and so I moult all my feathers." "Then," said the little girl, "I'll spill the milk." So she dropped the pitcher and spilt the milk. Now there was an old man just by on the top of a ladder thatching a rick, and when he saw the little girl spill the milk, he said, "Little girl, what do you mean by spilling the milk? Your little brothers and sisters must go without their supper." Then said the little girl, "Titty's dead and Tatty weeps, the stool hops and the broom sweeps, the door jars and the window creaks, the old form runs round the house, the walnut tree sheds all its leaves, the little bird moults all its feathers, and so I spill the milk." "Oh," said the old man, "then I'll tumble off the ladder and break my neck." So he tumbled off the ladder and broke his neck. And when the old man broke his neck, the great walnut tree fell down with a crash, and upset the old form and house, and the house falling knocked the window out, and the window knocked the door down, and the door upset the broom, and the broom upset the stool, and poor little Tatty Mouse was buried beneath the ruins. End of chapter 16. Titty Mouse and Tatty Mouse.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 17. Jack and his Golden Snuff Box. Once upon a time, and a very good time it was, though it was neither in my time nor in your time, nor in anyone else's time, there was an old man and an old woman, and they had one son, and they lived in a great forest. And their son never saw any other people in his life, but he knew that there was some more in the world besides his own father and mother, because he had lots of books, and he used to read every day about them. And when he read about some pretty young women, he used to go mad to see some of them, till one day, when his father was out cutting wood, he told his mother that he wished to go away to look for his living in some other country, and to see some other people besides them two. And he said, "I see nothing at all here but great trees around me, and if I stay here, maybe I shall go mad before I see anything." The young man's father was out all this time, when this talk was going on between him and his poor old mother. The old woman begins by saying to her son before leaving, "Well, well, my poor boy, if you want to go, it's better for you to go, and God be with you." The old woman thought for the best when she said that. "But stop a bit before you go. Which would you like best for me to make you, a little cake and bless you, or a big cake and curse you?" "Dear, dear," said he, "make me a big cake. Maybe I shall be hungry on the road." The old woman made the big cake, and she went on top of the house, and she cursed him as far as she could see him. He presently meets with his father, and the old man says to him, "Where are you going, my poor boy?" When the son told the father the same tale as he told his mother. "Well," says his father, "I'm sorry to see you going away, but if you've made your mind to go, it's better for you to go." The poor lad had not gone far when his father called him back. Then the old man drew out of his pocket a golden snuff-box and said to him, "Here, take this little box and put it in your pocket, and be sure not to open it till you are near your death." And away went poor Jack upon his road, and walked till he was tired and hungry, for he had eaten all his cake upon the road. And by this time night was upon him, so he could hardly see his way before him. He could see some light a long way before him, and he made up to it, and found the back door and knocked at it, till one of the maidservants came and asked him what he wanted. He said that night was on him, and he wanted to get some place to sleep. The maidservant called him in to the fire and gave him plenty to eat, good meat and bread and beer. And as he was eating his food by the fire, there came the young lady to look at him, and she loved him well, and he loved her. And the young lady ran to tell her father, and said there was a pretty young man in the back kitchen. And immediately the gentleman came to him, and questioned him, and asked what work he could do. Jack said, the silly fellow, that he could do anything. He meant that he could do any foolish bit of work that would be wanted about the house. "Well," says the gentleman to him, "if you can do anything, at 8 o'clock in the morning I must have a great lake and some of the largest man-of-war vessels sailing before my mansion, and one of the largest vessels must fire a royal salute, and the last round must break the leg of the bed where my young daughter is sleeping, and if you don't do that, you will have to forfeit your life." "All right," said Jack, and away he went to his bed, and said his prayers quietly, and slept till it was near 8 o'clock, and he had hardly any time to think what he was to do, till all of a sudden he remembered about the little golden box that his father gave him, and he said to himself, "Well, well, I never was so near my death as I am now." And then he felt in his pocket, and drew the little box out, and when he opened it, out there hopped 3 little red men, and asked Jack, "What is your will with us?" "Well," said Jack, "I want a great lake, and some of the largest man-of-war vessels in the world before this mansion, and one of the largest vessels to fire a royal salute, and the last round to break one of the legs of the bed where this young lady is sleeping." "All right," said the little men, "go to sleep." Jack had hardly time to bring the words out of his mouth to tell the little men what to do, but when it struck 8 o'clock, when bang, bang, went one of the largest man-of-war vessels, and it made Jack jump out of bed to look through the window, and I can assure you it was a wonderful sight for him to see, after being so long with his father and mother living in a wood. By this time Jack dressed himself, and said his prayers, and came down laughing, for he was proud he was, because the thing was done so well. The gentleman comes to him and says to him, "Well, my young man, I must say that you are very clever indeed. Come and have some breakfast." And the gentleman tells him, "Now there are 2 more things you have to do, and then you shall have my daughter in marriage." Jack gets his breakfast, and has a good squint at the young lady, and also she at him. The other thing that the gentleman told him to do was to fell all the great trees for miles around by 8 o'clock in the morning, and, to make my long story short, it was done, and it pleased the gentleman well. The gentleman said to him, "The other thing you have to do," and it was the last thing, "you must get me a great castle standing on 12 golden pillars, and there must come regiments of soldiers, and go through their drill. At 8 o'clock the commanding officer must say, 'Shoulder up.'" "All right," said Jack. When the 3rd and last morning came, the 3rd great feat was finished, and he had the young daughter in marriage. But oh dear, there is worse to come yet. The gentleman now makes a large hunting party, and invites all the gentlemen around the country to it, and to see the castle as well. And by this time Jack has a beautiful horse and a scarlet dress to go with them. On that morning his valet, when putting Jack's clothes by, after changing them to go a-hunting, put his hand in one of Jack's waistcoat pockets, and pulled out the little golden snuff-box, as poor Jack left behind in a mistake. And that man opened the little box, and there hopped the 3 little red men out, and asked him what he wanted with them. "Well," said the valet to them, "I want this castle to be moved from this place far and far across the sea." "All right," said the little red men to him. "Do you wish to go with it?" "Yes," said he. "Well, get up," said they to him, and away they went, far and far over the great sea. Now the grand hunting party comes back, and the castle upon the 12 golden pillars had disappeared, to the great disappointment of those gentlemen as did not see it before. That poor silly Jack is threatened by taking his beautiful young wife from him, for taking them in the way he did. But the gentleman at last made an agreement with him, and he is to have a 12 months and a day to look for it, and off he goes with a good horse and money in his pocket. Now poor Jack goes in search of his missing castle, over hills, dales, valleys, and mountains, through woolly woods and sheep-walks, further than I can tell you, or ever intend to tell you, until at last he comes up to the place where lives the king of all the little mice in the world. There was one of the little mice on sentry at the front gate, going up to the palace, and did try to stop Jack from going in. He asked the little mouse, "Where does the king live? I should like to see him." This one sent another with him to show him the place, and when the king saw him he called him in. And the king questioned him, and asked him where he was going that way. Well, Jack told him all the truth, that he had lost the great castle, and was going to look for it, and he had a whole 12 months and a day to find it out. And Jack asked him whether he knew anything about it, and the king said, "No, but I am the king of all the little mice in the world, and I will call them all up in the morning, and maybe they have seen something of it." Then Jack got a good meal and bed, and in the morning he and the king went on to the fields, and the king called all the mice together, and asked them whether they had seen the great beautiful castle standing on golden pillars. And all the little mice said, no, there was none of them had seen it. The old king said to him that he had 2 other brothers. "One is the king of all the frogs, and my other brother, who is the oldest, he is the king of all the birds in the world, and if you go there, maybe they know something about the missing castle." The king said to him, "Leave your horse here with me till you come back, and take one of my best horses under you, and give this cake to my brother. He will know then who you got it from. Mind and tell him I am well, and should like dearly to see him." And then the king and Jack shook hands together. And when Jack was going through the gates, the little mouse asked him, should he go with him? And Jack said to him, "No, I shall get myself into trouble with the king." And the little thing told him, "It will be better for you to let me go with you. Maybe I shall do some good to you some time without you knowing it." "Jump up, then." And the little mouse ran up the horse's leg and made it dance, and Jack put the mouse in his pocket. Now Jack, after wishing good morning to the king and pocketing the little mouse which was on sentry, trudged on his way, and such a long way he had to go, and this was his first day. At last he found the place, and there was one of the frogs on sentry, and gun upon his shoulder, and did try to hinder Jack from going in. But when Jack said to him that he wanted to see the king, he allowed him to pass, and Jack made up to the door. The king came out and asked him his business, and Jack told him all from beginning to end. "Well, well, come in." He gets good entertainment that night, and in the morning the king made such a funny sound, and collected all the frogs in the world, and he asked them, did they know or see anything of a castle that stood upon 12 golden pillars? And they all made a curious sound, crow, 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 and said, no. Jack had to take another horse, and a cake to this king's brother, who was the king of all the fowls of the air. And as Jack was going through the gates, the little frog that was on sentry asked John should he go with him. Jack refused him for a bit, but at last he told him to jump up, and Jack put him in his other waistcoat pocket, and away he went again on his great long journey. It was 3 times as long this time as it was the first day. However, he found the place, and there was a fine bird on sentry, and Jack passed him, and he never said a word to him, and he talked with the king and told him everything, all about the castle. "Well," said the king to him, "you shall know in the morning from my birds whether they know anything or not." Jack put up his horse in the stable, and then went to bed, after having something to eat. And when he got up in the morning, the king and he went on to some field, and there the king made some funny noise, and there came all the fowls that were in all the world. And the king asked them, did they see the fine castle? And all the birds answered, no. "Well," said the king, "where is the great bird?" They had to wait then for a long time for the eagle to make his appearance, when at last he came all in a perspiration, after sending 2 little birds high up in the sky to whistle on him to make all the haste he possibly could. The king asked the great bird, did he see the great castle? And the bird said, "Yes, I came from there where it now is." "Well," says the king to him, "this young gentleman has lost it, and you must go with him back to it, but stop till you get a bit of something to eat first." They killed a thief, and sent the best part of it to feed the eagle on his journey over the seas, and had to carry Jack on his back. Now when they came in sight of the castle, they did not know what to do to get the little golden box. Well, the little mouse said to them, "Leave me down, and I will get the little box for you." So the mouse stole into the castle, and got hold of the box, and when he was coming down the stairs it fell down, and he was very near being caught. He came running out with it, laughing his best. "Have you got it?" Jack said to him. He said, "Yes," and off they went back again, and left the castle behind. As they were all of them, Jack, Mouse, Frog, and Eagle, passing over the great sea, they fell to quarrelling about which it was that got the little box, till down it slipped into the water. It was by them looking at it and handing it from one hand to the other that they dropped the little box to the bottom of the sea. "Well, well," said the frog, "I knew that I would have to do something, so you had better let me go down in the water." And they let him go, and he was down for 3 days and 3 nights, and up he comes and shows his nose and little mouth out of the water, and all of them asked him, did he get it? And he told them, no. "Well, what are you doing there, then?" "Nothing at all," he said, "only I want my full breath." And the poor little frog went down the second time, and he was down for a day and a night, and up he brings it. And away they did go after being there 4 days and nights, and after a long tug over seas and mountains, arrive at the palace of the old king, who is the master of all the birds in the world, and the king is very proud to see them, and has a hearty welcome and a long conversation. Jack opens the little box, and told the little men to go back and to bring the castle here to them, "And all of you make as much haste back again as you possibly can." The 3 little men went off, and when they came near the castle, they were afraid to go to it till the gentleman and lady and all the servants were gone out to some dance. And there was no one left behind there, only the cook and another maid with her. And the little red men asked them which would they rather, go or stop behind? And they both said, "I will go with you." And the little men told them to run upstairs quick. They were no sooner up and in one of the drawing rooms than here comes, just in sight, the gentleman and lady and all the servants. But it was too late. Off the castle went at full speed, with the women laughing at them through the window, while they made motions for them to stop, but all to no purpose. They were 9 days on their journey, in which they did try to keep the Sunday holy, when one of the little men turned to be the priest, the other the clerk, and third presided at the organ, and the women were the singers, for they had a grand chapel in the castle already. Very remarkable, there was a discord made in the music, and one of the little men ran up one of the organ pipes to see where the bad sound came from, when he found out it only happened to be that the 2 women
were laughing at the little red man stretching his little legs full length on the bass pipes, also his 2 arms the same time, with his little red nightcap, which he never forgot to wear, and what they never witnessed before, could not help calling forth some good merriment while on the face of the deep. And poor thing, through them not going on with what they begun with, they very near came to danger, as the castle was once very near sinking in the middle of the sea. At length, after a merry journey, they come again to Jack and the King. The King was quite struck with the sight of the castle, and going up the golden stairs, went to see the inside. The King was very much pleased with the castle, but poor Jack's time of a 12 months and a day was drawing to a close, and he, wishing to go home to his young wife, gives orders to the 3 little men to get ready by the next morning at 8 o'clock to be off to the next brother, and to stop there for 1 night, also to proceed from there to the last or the youngest brother, the master of all the mice in the world, in such place where the castle shall be left unto his care until it's sent for. Jack takes a farewell of the King, and thanks him very much for his hospitality. Away went Jack in his castle again, and stopped 1 night in that place. And away they went again to the 3rd place, and there left the castle under his care. As Jack had to leave the castle behind, he had to take to his own horse, which he had left there when he first started. Now poor Jack leaves his castle behind, and faces towards home, and after having so much merriment with the 3 brothers every night, Jack became sleepy on horseback, and would have lost the road if it was not for the little men a-guiding him. At last he arrived weary and tired, and they did not seem to receive him with any kindness whatever, because he had not found the stolen castle. And to make it worse, he was disappointed in not seeing his young and beautiful wife to come and meet him, through being hindered by her parents. But that did not stop long. Jack put full power on, and dispatched the little men off to bring the castle from there, and they soon got there. Jack shook hands with the King, and returned many thanks for his kingly kindness in minding the castle for him. And then Jack instructed the little men to spur up and put speed on. And off they went, and were not long before they reached their journey's end, when out comes the young wife to meet him with a fine lump of a young son, and they all lived happily ever afterwards. End of chapter 17. Jack and his golden snuff box. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales, collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 18. The Story of the 3 Bears. Once upon a time there were 3 bears who lived together in a house of their own in a wood. One of them was a little, small, wee bear, and one was a middle-sized bear, and the other was a great, huge bear. They had each a pot for their porridge, a little pot for the little, small, wee bear, and a middle-sized pot for the middle bear, and a great pot for the great, huge bear. And they had each a chair to sit in, a little chair for the little, small, wee bear, and a middle-sized chair for the middle bear, and a great chair for the great, huge bear. And they had each a bed to sleep in, a little bed for the little, small, wee bear, and a middle-sized bed for the middle bear, and a great bed for the great, huge bear. One day, after they had made the porridge for their breakfast and poured it into their porridge pots, they walked out into the wood while the porridge was cooling, that they might not burn their mouths by beginning too soon to eat it. And while they were walking, a little old woman came to the house. She could not have been a good, honest old woman, for first she looked in at the window, and then she peeped in at the keyhole, and seeing nobody in the house, she lifted the latch. The door was not fastened, because the bears were good bears, who did nobody any harm, and never suspected that anybody would harm them. So the little old woman opened the door and went in, and well pleased she was when she saw the porridge on the table. If she had been a good little old woman, she would have waited till the bears came home, and then, perhaps, they would have asked her to breakfast, for they were good bears,
a little rough or so, as the manner of bears is, but for all that very good-natured and hospitable. But she was an impudent, bad old woman, and set about helping herself. So first she tasted the porridge of the Great Huge Bear, and that was too hot for her, and she said a bad word about that. And then she tasted the porridge of the Middle Bear, and that was too cold for her, and she said a bad word about that too. And then she went to the porridge of the Little Small Wee Bear, and tasted that, and that was neither too hot nor too cold, but just right, and she liked it so well that she ate it all up. But the naughty old woman said a bad word about the little porridge pot, because it did not hold enough for her. Then the little old woman sat down in the chair of the Great Huge Bear, and that was too hard for her. And then she sat down in the chair of the Middle Bear, and that was too soft for her. And then she sat down in the chair of the Little Small Wee Bear, and that was neither too hard nor too soft, but just right. So she seated herself in it, and there she sat till the bottom of the chair came out, and down she came plump upon the ground. And the naughty old woman said a wicked word about that too. Then the little old woman went upstairs into the bedchamber in which the 3 bears slept. At first she lay down upon the bed of the Great Huge Bear, but that was too high at the head for her. And next she lay down upon the bed of the Middle Bear, and that was too high at the foot for her. And then she lay down upon the bed of the Little Small Wee Bear, and that was neither too high at the head nor at the foot, but just right. So she covered herself up comfortably and lay there till she fell fast asleep. By this time the 3 bears thought their porridge would be cool enough, so they came home to breakfast. Now the little old woman had left the spoon of the Great Huge Bear standing in his porridge. "Somebody has been at my porridge," said the Great Huge Bear, in his great, rough, gruff voice. And when the Middle Bear looked at his, he saw that the spoon was standing in it too. They were wooden spoons. If they had been silver ones, the naughty old woman would have put them in her pocket. "Somebody has been at my porridge," said the Middle Bear in his middle voice. Then the Little Small Wee Bear looked at his, and there was the spoon in the porridge pot, but the porridge was all gone. "Somebody has been at my porridge, and has eaten it all up," said the Little Small Wee Bear in his little small wee voice. Upon this the 3 bears, seeing that someone had entered their house and had eaten up the Little Small Wee Bear's breakfast, began to look about them. Now the little old woman had not put the hard cushion straight when she rose from the chair of the Great Huge Bear. "Somebody has been sitting in my chair," said the Great Huge Bear in his great, rough, gruff voice. And the little old woman had squatted down the soft cushion of the Middle Bear. "Somebody has been sitting in my chair," said the Middle Bear in his middle voice. And you know what the little old woman had done to the 3rd chair. "Somebody has been sitting in my chair, and has set the bottom out of it," said the Little Small Wee Bear in his little small wee voice. Then the 3 bears thought it necessary that they should make farther search. So they went upstairs into their bedchamber. Now the little old woman had pulled the pillow of the Great Huge Bear out of its place. "Somebody has been lying in my bed," said the Great Huge Bear in his great, rough, gruff voice. And the little old woman had pulled the bolster of the Middle Bear out of its place. "Somebody has been lying in my bed," said the Middle Bear in his middle voice. And when the Little Small Wee Bear came to look at his bed, there was the bolster in its place, and the pillow in its place upon the bolster, and upon the pillow was the little old woman's ugly, dirty head, which was not in its place, for she had no business there. "Somebody has been lying in my bed, and here she is," said the Little Small Wee Bear in his little small wee voice. The little old woman had heard in her sleep the great, rough, gruff voice of the Great Huge Bear, but she was so fast asleep that it was no more to her than the roaring of wind, or the rumbling of thunder. And she had heard the middle voice of the Middle Bear, but it was only as if she had heard someone speaking in a dream.
But when she heard the little, small, wee voice of the little, small, wee bear, it was so sharp and so shrill that it awakened her at once. Up she started, and when she saw the three bears on one side of the bed, she tumbled herself out at the other and ran to the window. Now the window was open because the bears, like good, tidy bears as they were, always opened their bedchamber window when they got up in the morning. Out the little old woman jumped, and whether she broke her neck in the fall, or ran into the wood and was lost there, or found her way out of the wood and was taken up by the constable and sent to the house of correction for a vagrant as she was, I cannot tell. But the three bears never saw anything more of her. End of chapter 18. The story of the three bears. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 19. Jack the Giant Killer. When good King Arthur reigned, there lived near the Land's End of England in the county of Cornwall a farmer who had one only son called Jack. He was brisk and of a ready, lively wit, so that nobody or nothing could worst him. In those days the Mount of Cornwall was kept by a huge giant named Cormoran. He was 18 feet in height, and about 3 yards round the waist, of a fierce and grim countenance, the terror of all the neighbouring towns and villages. He lived in a cave in the midst of the mount, and whenever he wanted food he would wade over to the mainland, where he would furnish himself with whatever came in his way. Everybody at his approach ran out of their houses, while he seized on their cattle, making nothing of carrying 6 oxen on his back at a time. And as for their sheep and hogs, he would tie them round his waist like a bunch of tallow dips. He had done this for many years, so that all Cornwall was in despair. One day Jack happened to be at the town hall when the magistrates were sitting in council about the giant. He asked, "What reward will be given to the man who kills Cormoran?" "The giant's treasure," they said, "will be the reward." Quoth Jack, "Then let me undertake it." So he got a horn, shovel, and pickaxe, and went over to the mount in the beginning of a dark winter's evening, when he fell to work, and before morning had dug a pit 22 feet deep, and nearly as broad, covering it over with long sticks and straw. Then he strewed a little mould over it, so that it appeared like plain ground. Jack then placed himself on the opposite side of the pit, farthest from the giant's lodging, and just at the break of day he put the horn to his mouth and blew, "Tantivy, Tantivy." This noise roused the giant, who rushed from his cave, crying, "You incorrigible villain! Are you come here to disturb my rest? You shall pay dearly for this. Satisfaction I will have, and this it shall be. I will take you whole and broil you for breakfast." He had no sooner uttered this than he tumbled into the pit, and made the very foundations of the mount to shake. "O giant," quoth Jack, "where are you now? Oh, faith, you are gotten now to Lob's Pound, where I will surely plague you for threatening words. What do you think now of broiling me for your breakfast? Will no other diet serve you but poor Jack?" Then, having tantalized the giant for a while, he gave him a most weighty knock with his pickaxe on the very crown of his head, and killed him on the spot. Jack then filled up the pit with earth and went to search the cave, which he found contained much treasure. When the magistrates heard of this, they made a declaration he should henceforth be termed Jack the Giant Killer, and presented him with a sword and a belt, on which were written these words embroidered in letters of gold: "He is the right valiant Cornish man, who slew the giant Cormoran." The news of Jack's victory soon spread over all the west of England, so that another giant, named Blunderbore, hearing of it, vowed to be revenged on Jack if ever he should light on him. This giant was the lord of an enchanted castle, situated in the midst of a lonesome wood. Now Jack, about 4 months afterwards, walking near this wood in his journey to Wales, being weary, seated himself near a pleasant fountain, and fell fast asleep. While he was sleeping, the giant, coming there for water, discovered him, and knew him to be the far-famed Jack the Giant Killer, by the lines written on the belt.
Without ado he took Jack on his shoulders and carried him towards his castle. Now as they passed through a thicket, the rustling of the boughs awakened Jack, who was strangely surprised to find himself in the clutches of the giant. His terror was only begun, for, on entering the castle, he saw the ground strewed with human bones, and the giant told him his own would ere long be among them. After this the giant locked poor Jack in an immense chamber, leaving him there while he went to fetch another giant, his brother, living in the same wood, who might share in the meal on Jack. After waiting some time, Jack, on going to the window, beheld afar off the two giants coming towards the castle. "Now," quoth Jack to himself, "my death or my deliverance is at hand." Now there were strong cords in a corner of the room in which Jack was, and 2 of these he took, and made a strong noose at the end. And while the giants were unlocking the iron gate of the castle, he threw the ropes over each of their heads. Then he drew the other ends across a beam, and pulled with all his might, so that he throttled them. Then, when he saw they were black in the face, he slid down the rope, and drawing his sword, slew them both. Then taking the giant's keys, and unlocking the rooms, he found 3 fair ladies tied by the hair of their heads, almost starved to death. "Sweet ladies," quoth Jack, "I have destroyed this monster and his brutish brother, and obtained your liberties." This said, he presented them with the keys, and so proceeded on his journey to Wales. Jack made the best of his way by travelling as fast as he could, but lost his road and was benighted, and could find any habitation until, coming into a narrow valley, he found a large house, and in order to get shelter took courage to knock at the gate. But what was his surprise when there came forth a monstrous giant with 2 heads. Yet he did not appear so fiery as the others were, for he was a Welsh giant, and what he did was by private and secret malice under the false show of friendship. Jack, having told his condition to the giant, was shown into a bedroom where, in the dead of night, he heard his host in another apartment muttering these words: "Though here you lodge with me this night, you shall not see the morning light. My club shall dash your brains outright." "Say'st thou so?" quoth Jack. "That is like one of your Welsh tricks, yet I hope to be cunning enough for you." Then, getting out of bed, he laid a billet in the bed in his stead, and hid himself in a corner of the room. At the dead time of the night, in came the Welsh giant, who struck several heavy blows on the bed with his club, thinking he had broken every bone in Jack's skin. The next morning Jack, laughing in his sleeve, gave him hearty thanks for his night's lodging. "How have you rested?" quoth the giant. "Did you not feel anything in the night?" "No," quoth Jack, "nothing but a rat which gave me 2 or 3 slats with her tail." With that, greatly wondering, the giant led Jack to breakfast, bringing him a bowl containing 4 gallons of hasty pudding. Being loath to let the giant think it too much for him, Jack put a large leather bag under his loose coat, in such a way that he could convey the pudding into it without its being perceived. Then, telling the giant he would show him a trick, taking a knife Jack ripped open the bag, and out came all the hasty pudding. Whereupon saying, "Odd splutters her nails, her can do that trick herself," the monster took the knife, and ripping open his belly, fell down dead. Now it happened in these days that King Arthur's only son asked his father to give him a large sum of money, in order that he might go and seek his fortune in the Principality of Wales, where lived a beautiful lady possessed with 7 evil spirits. The king did his best to persuade his son from it, but in vain, so at last gave way, and the prince set out with 2 horses, one loaded with money, the other for himself to ride upon. Now after several days' travel, he came to a market town in Wales, where he beheld a vast crowd of people gathered together. The prince asked the reason of it, and was told that they had arrested a corpse for several large sums of money which the deceased owed when he died. The prince replied that it was a pity creditors should be so cruel, and said, "Go bury the dead, and let his creditors come to my lodging, and there their debts shall be paid." They came in such great numbers that before night he had only 2 pence left for himself. Now Jack the Giant Killer, coming that way, was so taken with the generosity of the prince that he desired to be his servant. This being agreed upon,
The next morning they set forward on their journey together, when, as they were riding out of the town, an old woman called after the prince, saying, "He has owed me 2 pence these 7 years. Pray pay me as well as the rest." Putting his hand to his pocket, the prince gave the woman all he had left, so that after their day's food, which cost what small spell Jack had by him, they were without a penny between them. When the sun got low, the king's son said, "Jack, since we have no money, where can we lodge this night?" But Jack replied, "Master, we'll do well enough, for I have an uncle lives within 2 miles of this place. He is a huge and monstrous giant with 3 heads. He'll fight 500 men in armour and make them to fly before him." "Alas," quoth the prince, "what shall we do there? He'll certainly chop us up at a mouthful. Nay, we are scarce enough to fill one of his hollow teeth." "It is no matter for that," quoth Jack. "I myself will go before and prepare the way for you. Therefore stop here and wait till I return." Jack then rode away at full speed, and coming to the gate of the castle, he knocked so loud that he made the neighbouring hills resound. The giant roared out at this like thunder, "Who's there?" Jack answered, "None but your poor cousin Jack." Quoth he, "What news with my poor cousin Jack?" He replied, "Dear uncle, heavy news, good what?" "Prithee," quoth the giant, "what heavy news can come to me? I am a giant with 3 heads, and besides, thou knowest I can fight 500 men in armour, and make them fly like chaff before the wind." "Oh, but," quoth Jack, "here is the king's son a-coming with 1,000 men in armour to kill you and destroy all that you have." "Oh, cousin Jack," said the giant, "this is heavy news indeed. I will immediately run and hide myself, and thou shalt lock, bolt, and bar me in, and keep the keys until the prince is gone." Having secured the giant, Jack fetched his master, when they made themselves heartily merry, whilst the poor giant lay trembling in a vault under the ground. Early in the morning Jack furnished his master with a fresh supply of gold and silver, and then sent him 3 miles forward on his journey, at which time the prince was pretty well out of the smell of the giant. Jack then returned and let the giant out of the vault, who asked what he should give him for keeping the castle from destruction. "Why," quoth Jack, "I want nothing but the old coat and cap, together with the old rusty sword and slippers which are at your bed's head." Quoth the giant, "You know not what you ask. They are the most precious things I have. The coat will keep you invisible, the cap will tell you all you want to know, the sword cuts asunder whatever you strike, and the shoes are of extraordinary swiftness. But you have been very serviceable to me, therefore take them with all my heart." Jack thanked his uncle, and then went off with them. He soon overtook his master, and they quickly arrived at the house of the lady the prince sought, who, finding the prince to be a suitor, prepared a splendid banquet for him. After the repast was concluded, she told him she had a task for him. She wiped his mouth with a handkerchief, saying, "You must show me that handkerchief tomorrow morning, or else you will lose your head." With that she put it in her bosom. The prince went to bed in great sorrow, but Jack's cap of knowledge informed him how it was to be obtained. In the middle of the night she called upon her familiar spirit to carry her to Lucifer. But Jack put on his coat of darkness and his shoes of swiftness, and was there as soon as she was. When she entered the place of the old one, she gave the handkerchief to old Lucifer, who laid it upon a shelf, whence Jack took it and brought it to his master, who showed it to the lady next day, and so saved his life. On that day she gave the prince a kiss and told him he must show her the lips tomorrow morning that she kissed last night, or lose his head. "Ah," he replied, "if you kiss none but mine, I will." "That is neither here nor there," said she. "If you do not, death's your portion." At midnight she went as before, and was angry with old Lucifer for letting the handkerchief go. "But now," quoth she, "I will be too hard for the king's son, for I will kiss thee, and he is to show me thy lips." Which she did, and Jack, when she was not standing by, cut off Lucifer's head, and brought it under his invisible coat to his master, who the next morning pulled it out by the horns before the lady. This broke the enchantment, and the evil spirit left her, and she appeared in all her beauty. They were married the next morning, and soon after went to the court of King Arthur, where Jack, for his many great exploits, was made one of the knights of the Round Table. Jack soon went searching for giants again, but he had not ridden far when he saw a cave, near the entrance of which he beheld a giant sitting upon a block of timber, with a knotted iron club by his side. His goggle eyes were like flames of fire, his countenance grim and ugly, and his cheeks like a couple of large flitches of bacon, while the bristles of his beard resembled rods of iron wire, and the locks that hung down upon his brawny shoulders were like curled snakes or hissing adders. Jack alighted from his horse, and, putting on the coat of darkness, went up close to the giant, and said softly, "Oh, are you there? It will not be long before I take you fast by the beard." The giant all this while could not see him on account of his invisible coat, so that Jack, coming up close to the monster, struck a blow with his sword at his head, but, missing his aim, he cut off the nose instead. At this the giant roared like claps of thunder, and began to lay about him with his iron club like one stark mad. But Jack, running behind, drove his sword up to the hilt in the giant's back, so that he fell down dead. This done, Jack cut off the giant's head and sent it with his brothers also to King Arthur, by a waggoner he hired for that purpose. Jack now resolved to enter the giant's cave in search of his treasure, and passing along through a great many windings and turnings, he came at length to a large room paved with freestone, at the upper end of which was a boiling cauldron, and on the right hand a large table, at which the giant used to dine. Then he came to a window barred with iron, through which he looked and beheld a vast number of miserable captives, who, seeing him, cried out, "Alas, young man, art thou come to be one amongst us in this miserable den?" "Ay," quoth Jack, "but pray tell me what is the meaning of your captivity?" "We are kept here," said one, "till such time as the giants have a wish to feast, and then the fattest among us is slaughtered, and many other times they have dined upon murdered men." "Say you so?" quoth Jack, and straightway unlocked the gate and let them free, who all rejoiced like condemned men at sight of a pardon. Then searching the giant's coffers, he shared the gold and silver equally amongst them, and took them to a neighbouring castle, where they all feasted and made merry over their deliverance. But in the midst of all this mirth a messenger brought news that one Thunderdell, a giant with 2 heads, having heard of the death of his kinsman, had come from the northern dales to be revenged on Jack, and was within a mile of the castle, the country people flying before him like chaff. But Jack was not a bit daunted, and said, "Let him come. I have a tool to pick his teeth. And you, ladies and gentlemen, walk out into the garden, and you shall witness this great Thunderdell's death and destruction." The castle was situated in the midst of a small island, surrounded by a moat 30 feet deep and 20 feet wide, over which lay a drawbridge. So Jack employed men to cut through this bridge on both sides, nearly to the middle, and then, dressing himself in his invisible coat, he marched against the giant with a sword of sharpness. Although the giant could not see Jack, he smelt his approach and cried out in these words, "Fee, fi, fo, fum! I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make me bread." "Say'st thou so?" said Jack. "Then thou art a monstrous miller indeed." The giant cried out again, "Art thou that villain who killed my kinsman? Then I will tear thee with my teeth, suck thy blood, and grind thy bones to powder." "You'll have to catch me first," quoth Jack, and throwing off his invisible coat so that the giant might see him, and putting on his shoes of swiftness, he ran from the giant, who followed like a walking castle, so that the very foundations of the earth seemed to shake at every step. Jack led him a long dance, in order that the gentlemen and ladies might see, and at last, to end the matter, ran lightly over the drawbridge, the giant in full speed, pursuing him with his club. Then, coming to the middle of the bridge, the giant's great weight broke it down, and he tumbled headlong into the water, where he rolled and wallowed like a whale. Jack, standing by the moat, laughed at him all the while, but though the giant foamed to hear him scoff, and plunged from place to place in the moat, yet he could not get out to be revenged. Jack at length got a cart rope and cast it over the 2 heads of the giant, and drew him ashore by a team of horses, and then cut off both his heads with his sword of sharpness, and sent them to King Arthur. After some time spent in mirth and pastime, Jack, taking leave of the knights and ladies, set out for new adventures. Through many woods he passed, and came at length to the foot of a high mountain. Here, late at night, he found a lonesome house, and knocked at the door, which was opened by an aged man with a head as white as snow. "Father," said Jack, "can you lodge a benighted traveller that has lost his way?" "Yes," said the old man, "you are right welcome to my poor cottage." Whereupon Jack entered, and down they sat together, and the old man began to speak as follows. "Son, I see by your belt you are the great conqueror of giants. And behold, my son, on the top of this mountain is an enchanted castle. This is kept by a giant named Gilligantua, and he, by the help of an old conjurer, betrays many knights and ladies into his castle, where by magic art they are transformed into sundry shapes and forms. But above all I grieve for a duke's daughter, whom they fetched from her father's garden, carrying her through the air in a burning chariot drawn by fiery dragons, when they secured her within the castle, and transformed her into a white hind. And though many knights have tried to break the enchantment and work her deliverance, yet no one could accomplish it, on account of 2 dreadful griffins which are placed at the castle gate, and which destroy every one who comes near. But you, my son, may pass by them undiscovered, where on the gates of the castle you will find engraven in large letters how the spell may be broken." Jack gave the old man his hand, and promised that in the morning he would venture his life to free the lady. In the morning Jack arose and put on his invisible coat and magic cap and shoes, and prepared himself for the fray. Now when he had reached the top of the mountain he soon discovered the 2 fiery griffins, but passed them without fear, because of his invisible coat. When he had got beyond them he found upon the gates of the castle a golden trumpet hung by a silver chain, under which these lines were engraved: "Whoever shall this trumpet blow shall soon the giant overthrow, and break the black enchantment straight, so all shall be in happy state." Jack had no sooner read this but he blew the trumpet, at which the castle trembled to its vast foundations, and the giant and conjurer were in horrid confusion, biting their thumbs and tearing their hair, knowing their wicked reign was at an end. Then the giant, stooping to take up his club, Jack at one blow cut off his head, whereupon the conjurer, mounting up into the air, was carried away in a whirlwind. Then the enchantment was broken, and all the lords and ladies who had so long been transformed into birds and beasts returned to their proper shapes, and the castle vanished away in a cloud of smoke. This being done, the head of Gilligantua was likewise, in the usual manner, conveyed to the court of King Arthur, where the very next day Jack followed, with the knights and ladies who had been delivered. Whereupon, as a reward for his good services, the king prevailed upon the duke to bestow his daughter in marriage on honest Jack. So married they were, and the whole kingdom was filled with joy at the wedding. Furthermore, the king bestowed on Jack a noble castle with a very beautiful estate thereto belonging, where he and his lady lived in great joy and happiness all the rest of their days. End of chapter 19. Jack the Giant Killer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 20. Henny Penny. One day Henny Penny was picking up corn in the cornyard when, whack! Something hit her upon the head. "Goodness gracious me," said Henny Penny, "the skies are going to fall. I must go and tell the king." So she went along, and she went along, and she went along, till she met Cocky Locky. "Where are you going, Henny Penny?" says Cocky Locky. "Oh, I'm going to tell the king the skies are falling," says Henny Penny. "May I come with you?" says Cocky Locky. "Certainly," says Henny Penny. So Henny Penny and Cocky Locky went to tell the king the sky was falling. They went along, and they went along, and they went along, till they met Ducky Daddles. "Where are you going to, Henny Penny and Cocky Locky?" says Ducky Daddles. "Oh, we're going to tell the king the skies are falling," said Henny Penny and Cocky Locky. "May I come with you?" says Ducky Daddles. "Certainly," said Henny Penny and Cocky Locky. So Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, and Ducky Daddles went to tell the king the sky was a-falling. So they went along, and they went along, and they went along, till they met Goosey Poosey. "Where are you going to, Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, and Ducky Daddles?" said Goosey Poosey. "Oh, we're going to tell the king the skies are falling," said Henny Penny and Cocky Locky and Ducky Daddles. "May I come with you?" said Goosey Poosey. "Certainly," said Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, and Ducky Daddles. So Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, and Goosey Poosey went to tell the king the sky was a-falling. So they went along, and they went along, and they went along, till they met Turkey Lurkey. "Where are you going, Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, and Goosey Poosey?" says Turkey Lurkey. "Oh, we're going to tell the king the skies are falling," said Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, and Goosey Poosey. "May I come with you, Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, and Goosey Poosey?" said Turkey Lurkey. "Why, certainly, Turkey Lurkey," said Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, and Goosey Poosey. So Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, Goosey Poosey, and Turkey Lurkey all went to tell the king the sky was a-falling. So they went along, and they went along, and they went along, till they met Foxy Woxy. And Foxy Woxy said to Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, Goosey Poosey, and Turkey Lurkey, "Where are you going, Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, Goosey Poosey, and Turkey Lurkey?" And Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, Goosey Poosey, and Turkey Lurkey said to Foxy Woxy, "We're going to tell the king the skies are falling." "Oh, but this is not the way to the king, Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, Goosey Poosey, and Turkey Lurkey," says Foxy Woxy. "I know the proper way. Shall I show it you?" "Why, certainly, Foxy Woxy," said Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, Goosey Poosey, and Turkey Lurkey. So Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, Goosey Poosey, Turkey Lurkey, and Foxy Woxy all went to tell the king the sky was a-falling. So they went along, and they went along, and they went along, till they came to a narrow and dark hole. Now this was the door of Foxy Woxy's cave. But Foxy Woxy said to Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, Goosey Poosey, and Turkey Lurkey, "This is the short way to the king's palace. You'll soon get there if you follow me. I will go first, and you come after, Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, Goosey Poosey, and Turkey Lurkey." "Why, of course, certainly, without doubt. Why not?" said Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, Goosey Poosey, and Turkey Lurkey. So Foxy Woxy went into his cave, and he didn't go very far, but turned round to wait for Henny Penny, Cocky Locky, Ducky Daddles, Goosey Poosey, and Turkey Lurkey. So at first Turkey Lurkey went through the dark hole into the cave. He hadn't got far when, "Hrumph!" Foxy Woxy snapped off Turkey Lurkey's head and threw his body over his left shoulder. Then Goosey Poosey went in, and "Hrumph!" off went her head, and Goosey Poosey was thrown beside Turkey Lurkey. Then Ducky Daddles waddled down, and "Hrumph!" snapped Foxy Woxy, and Ducky Daddles' head was off, and Ducky Daddles was thrown alongside Turkey Lurkey and Goosey Poosey. Then Cocky Locky strutted down into the cave, and he hadn't gone far when, snap, hrumph, went Foxy Woxy, and Cocky Locky was thrown alongside of Turkey Lurkey, Goosey Poosey, and Ducky Daddles. But Foxy Woxy had made 2 bites at Cocky Locky, and when the first snap only hurt Cocky Locky but didn't kill him, he called out to Henny Penny. So she turned tail and ran back home. So she never told the king the sky was a-falling. End of chapter 20. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. English Fairy Tales collected by Joseph Jacobs. Chapter 21. Childe Roland. Childe Roland and his brothers twain were playing at the ball, and there was their sister Burd Ellen in the midst among them all. Childe Roland kicked it with his foot, and caught it with his knee. At last, as he plunged among them all, o'er the church he made it flee. Burd Ellen round about the isle, to seek the ball is gone, but long they waited, and longer still, and she came not back again.
They sought her east, they sought her west, they sought her up and down, and woe were the hearts of those brethren, for she was not to be found. So at last her eldest brother went to the warlock Merlin and told him all the case, and asked him if he knew where Burd Ellen was. "The fair Burd Ellen," said warlock Merlin, "must have been carried off by the fairies, because she went round the church wider shins, the opposite way to the sun. She is now in the dark tower of the King of Elfland. It would take the boldest knight in Christendom to bring her back." "If it is possible to bring her back," said her brother, "I'll do it, or perish in the attempt." "Possible it is," said the warlock Merlin, "but woe to the man or mother's son that attempts it, if he is not well taught beforehand what he is to do." The eldest brother of Burd Ellen was not to be put off, by any fear of danger, from attempting to get her back. So he begged the warlock Merlin to tell him what he should do, and what he should not do, in going to seek his sister. And after he had been taught and had repeated his lesson, he set out for Elfland. But long they waited, and longer still, with doubt and muckle pain. But woe were the hearts of his brethren, for he came not back again. Then the second brother got tired and sick of waiting, and went to the warlock Merlin, and asked him the same as his brother. So he set out to find Burd Ellen. But long they waited, and longer still, with muckle doubt and pain. And woe were his mother's and brother's heart, for he came not back again. And when they had waited and waited a good long time, Childe Rowland, the youngest of Burd Ellen's brothers, wished to go, and went to his mother the good queen, to ask her to let him go. But she would not at first, for he was the last of her children she now had, and if he was lost, all would be lost. But he begged and he begged, till at last the good queen let him go, and gave him his father's good brand that never struck in vain. And as she girt it round his waist, she said the spell that would give it victory. So Childe Rowland said good-bye to the good queen, his mother, and went to the cave of the warlock Merlin. "Once more, and but once more," he said to the warlock, "tell how man or mother's son may rescue Burd Ellen and her brothers twain." "Well, my son," said the warlock Merlin, "there are but two things, simple they may seem, but hard they are to do. One thing to do and one thing not to do. And the thing to do is this: after you have entered the land of Faery, whoever speaks to you, till you meet the Burd Ellen, you must out with your father's brand, and off with their head. And what you've not to do is this: bite no bit, and drink no drop, however hungry or thirsty you be. Drink a drop or bite a bit, while in Elfland you be, and never will you see Middle-earth again." So Childe Rowland said the two things over and over again, till he knew them by heart, and he thanked the warlock Merlin, and went on his way. And he went along, and along, and along, and still further along, till he came to the horseherd of the King of Elfland, feeding his horses. These he knew by their fiery eyes, and knew that he was at last in the land of Faery. "Canst thou tell me," said Childe Rowland to the horseherd, "where the King of Elfland's dark tower is?" "I cannot tell thee," said the horseherd, "but go on a little further, and thou wilt come to the cowherd, and he, maybe, can tell thee." Then without a word more, Childe Rowland drew the good brand that never struck